And we are live. Hi, this is Eric from longboxreview.com. Welcome to the show. This is the second part of the discussion that I'm having with Damian, SleepyReader666. Hello, Damian.
Hello, everyone. Yep, this is Damian from SleepyReader666, my YouTube channel. And I'm really excited to be back.
Excellent. And I'm very pleased that Damian agreed to come back, even though I talked his ear off last time. Although I don't think that will change for this discussion, because we are continuing our discussion of the wonderful image series Danger Club by Landry Q. Walker, Eric Jones, and Rusty Drake. And we will be discussing issues 5 through 8, plus the alternate ending issue number 8, which I cannot wait to get to, Damian, to discuss with you.
Yeah, I finally got the second version a few weeks ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because my shops didn't have it, and I didn't want to buy it. Although now that I think about it, since probably eventually I want to buy all this digitally, I didn't want to buy it digitally, so I had to order it through the mail to get the different version.
Okay. So I actually I bought both issues digitally before I received the print copies, because I did pre-order both of those,
right,
from the place that I get my comics from. But I can't imagine. So your introduction, or your introduction to the ending of this series was only the main issue,
right? And I couldn't figure out what this difference could be that they were talking about until I finally read it.
Oh wow! I cannot wait to discuss this.
We'll get to that at the end of this podcast.
Yes. Oh, I'm so excited. Let's see here. So last time, Damian and I talked about issues 1 through 4, which was collected in the nice trade here, Volume 1, Death. And like I said, we'll be discussing 5 through 8, which is collected here in Volume 2, Rebirth. However, the Volume 2 trade does not contain the alternate issue, the alternate ending.
Weird. That's surprising.
Yes.
They like those covers. They most often nowadays trades just have used one of the covers from the issue, but they do new covers there.
Oh, yeah.
I had a question also about the trades, because we kept reading the little front piece of text that kind of set up each issue. Are those front pieces in the trade?
They are. They actually are. So
I thought those were very important.
Yeah, you get the same cover that was in the monthly issue, and then you get the inside cover piece. But instead of all of the credits and everything that you see in the floppy version, you just get the text. You can kind of see it here in the video. The text with a background image. So I'm gonna mighty glare on there, but that's it. That's all you get in there.
Right. So it's the same background image, but now you can actually see the background image.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So that's good. I'm really glad they included that in the trade, because I think part of the nature of all of Danger Club seems to me that their clues are hidden in places where you don't quite. You think this is just a little bit of filler, but really it has important bits of information in it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just like the retro pages, the Silver Age introductions that we get for every issue. You know, there's something in there, something more than just what we're seeing on that page that pertains to the rest of the story. So yeah.
Right. It's more than just ironic counterpoint. When you get those retro looking pages, they actually have little nuggets of information.
Exactly.
Which adds to the fun of reading this and rereading this. Yes,
definitely. I've had so much fun rereading this in preparation for our discussions, Damian, that I think I just need to go back and do that with all these favorite comic series of mine, because it has opened up my eyes to more of the depth that's in this. And I'm not saying that every series out there has a lot of depth to it, but this one certainly does. And I know that other comics that I tend to think of from my past, where I think of them as beloved series or runs or just storylines, there's probably a lot more there than I encountered or saw when I originally read those issues. I'm thinking of New Teen Titans stuff in particular, which is pertinent because, as we discussed last time, the New Teen Titans was a huge influence on the creators of this book, in terms of the type of story they're telling, the types of characters that they have in the issues. So, like I said, it's very pertinent. I wanted just to talk about briefly.
Sorry, on that point that you just made, thinking about our discussions about this and the rereading of it and looking at everything more closely, it takes me back to my earliest childhood experiences of reading comic books, because I would get one comic book at a time. I loved comic books so much that to increase the experience, I would reread that one comic book over and over again and examine it in my childlike way, to try to figure out. And this is how you sort of come to really understand comics, is by, trying to, like, you come in the middle of an Avengers story or a Commandy story, and you have to figure out who all the characters are and all of that. And so as a kid, you have the time to really relook at these. And now as veteran comic book readers with all kinds of busy lives, we usually rush right through them. But there's this huge pleasure in examining all the nooks and crannies. Yeah.
Well said. Well put. Yeah, it is funny, isn't it? I did the same exact thing when I was a kid, just starting out reading comics when, I only got, 2 or 3 at a time,
right?
If I were lucky. And now that I'm older and I have a lot more disposable income, and I do buy a lot more comics in comparison to what I did in my youth, I don't tend to savor them as much as I did. And it's kind of sad.
It is. And yet we want lots of comics.
Yes.
I must get about 50 new comics a month. So
wow.
You just can't spend that time reading them all, even if I were a child and had more free time.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. I wanted to, before we dive into the issues again, I wanted to just talk briefly about the release schedule of this book, and a few facts about it. So, as I mentioned last time, when I mentioned previously, Rusty Drake's kids were involved in an auto accident. This was around the time that they were either working on issue 4 or right before issue 4 came out. I don't remember exactly. I have to go back and look. But that started a cascade with the rest of the series that led to a bunch of delays. Now, it wasn't just that incident, but that was the start of it. And because things were taking a certain amount of time to get back into it, into the swing of things, in some interviews that I read with Mr. Walker and Mr. Jones, they talked about how basically Rusty was doing the colors for this series in his spare time after his normal, 8 to 5 job. So, and they didn't want to do it with anybody else. So they were willing to wait, and but then they also had to, Mr. Walker had other commitments, so did Mr. Jones, so it just led to some delays. So between issue 4 and 5, which was the split in the trades, there was about a 6-month delay. So issue 5 came out in April of 2013, and then we have a huge jump in time between issue 5 and 6. And so that was issue 6 came out in the end of January 2015.
That's interesting. Wow. So wait, when did 5 come out again?
That was April of 2013.
April, and then January. So that's like 7 or 8 months, maybe 9 months. Wow.
That's
so
a year.
A
year and 9 months.
Right.
If I did my calculations correct.
Sorry. Because I remember there being a long wait for 5.
Right.
And I think at that point, maybe I just stopped even paying attention, and it was just a surprise when Danger Club would come out again.
And see, I was combing previews every month to see if the new issue of Danger Club was being solicited. So I was very excited to see that whenever I did.
And as a veteran comic book reader, I think I sort of expected at that point it wouldn't continue. I mean, there are always books that just disappear.
That's true, right? And since we're talking about issue 6, I did read recently an interview with Mr. Walker that the series was actually intended to be a 6-issue series, but somewhere in between when they started it and obviously when they ended it, I think it had to do more with the time delay than anything else. They decided to increase it to an 8-issue series.
Could that be because they had already released a 4-issue trade, and so it would balance out the trades?
Perhaps, yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Got more ideas too.
Well, and that's really what they did talk about in the interview that I read, was that they wanted to flesh out some things that they weren't going to be able to do so in just 6 issues.
Right.
So I'm pleased at that.
And that's a great thing about working for Image, that since the creators are driving the bus, they can change their mind and do more issues if they want to do more issues, as opposed to, I think if you worked for a regular comic book company, you would have contracted out 6 issues. You would have to find a way to do it in 6 issues, at least usually. Yeah,
exactly. Let's see. Issue 7 came out a month after issue 6, and that is once they came back with issue 6, 7, and 8. They intended to have everything come out monthly, and that was their plan. That was Image Comics' desire as well, and so that came out in February of 2015, and then finally issue 8 and 8.2 or 8B, however you want to think about it.
Right.
They both came out in it. So actually, issue 7 came out late February. Issue 8 came out early April. So it was about a month, not quite exactly a month, but there you go. It came out, close enough. Then close enough, exactly. And then the trade paperback, the second trade paperback collecting issues 5 through 8 came out in June of this year, 2015. So there you go.
And issue 8, with a little bit of publicity, had two different endings. Which is why there's 2 different versions. I guess it's the last 3 pages that are different, or the last 4. Actually,
I have several notes about that. I think. Hold on a second. Let me page through or get to that real quick. It is more than just 3 pages, but on some pages it's just a minor change in dialogue or the text box. And other pages, it's quite significant. So we actually I have notes for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages that have differences between the 2 issues.
I need to sit down and read them side by side.
Well, that's what I did. I figured I needed to do that.
I ran out of time to do that sort of thing, unfortunately. But.
Well, and I had a slight advantage there because when I went to Emerald City Comic Con, and I think I mentioned this before, but when I went to the con and saw Mr. Walker there, we had a lengthy conversation about Danger Club and other things that he was working on or interested in, and he showed me advanced pages for issue 8. That they were black and white copies of the issue, and he told me specifically that there were differences between the 2 versions. So I knew to look for that when we were preparing for this discussion. Maybe I should have told you that. So I apologize, okay. Damian.
If I had more time, I think I would have purposefully started issue 8.1 from the beginning again, but I just didn't have the time, so I just sort of flipped that look change.
Well, it'll be a discovery for you as we get to them.
I look forward to rereading it again at some point.
Yeah. All right, so that's the background, if you will, for this second half of Danger Club. Damian, shall we jump right into the issues?
Issue number 5.
Issue number 5
has blood and a eye patch on the cover.
Does not bode well for Mr. Jack Fearless, huh?
Right. We've thought, well, Jack Fearless has helped out in the last issue, helped out by shooting his best friend in the head. But apparently they won't, judging. And shall I read the front piece?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Or did you want to sort of try to summarize it first, or?
No, let's just dive right into it.
Okay. There were no heroes, not anymore, only us. One by one, we would fall to the darkness that had descended upon our world. It was the end of everything, and there was nothing we could do to stop it, except pray. So we've been wondering who writes those, whose voice those front pieces are in. And before we went back and forth and finally decided it probably was Kid Vigilante, but now Kid Vigilante seems to be dead. So we're once again, as I was reading this issue, wondering who that might be, who the we are.
Ooh, good point. I hadn't thought of that. You're right. He is supposedly dead at this point, and yet we have this text. So, but it is in the past tense. So maybe it's like, it's like Captain Kirk's logs. When
Right.
when he's actually, as we're watching the events occur in the episode, he's actually talking about them as if they already happened. So maybe that's kind of what we're doing or dealing with.
So it's
here.
a clue to us, maybe, that Kid Vigilante will be back.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too. I didn't really glom onto this until you read it, but the pray part, except pray, based on what I have seen of Kid Vigilante, that is not something that I think that he does that
True.
he believes in. He doesn't seem like the praying type, is what I'm trying to say.
But knowing what's coming up, praying links up to certain things that he does turn to.
Very good. Yes.
Praise.
Yes.
So we're now used to, if you've watched or listened to our other podcast, we're used to the first page is always a sort of mock Silver Age kind of splash page. And this one's the American Spirit in the Terror of Dr. Tick-Tock. And it does say America's #1 superhero. And the American Spirit looks more like the Fighting American or the Shield, which were imitators of Captain America.
Yeah, that's a good observation. You're right.
I mean, that's not important, but it's just a bit of comic book trivia. Obviously, Captain America was a very popular hero in the 40s and had a lot of imitators. Less so now, but they exist in the history of comics.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to point out a few things on that first panel. The whole idea of these dino Nazis that we get. Dinosaur heads on these Nazi bodies. That's just such a Silver Age maybe I don't know. It's actually kind of Golden Age-ish to me. Maybe a little Silver Age, and then Dr. Tick-Tock. His, just these little details that they're throwing in here. The glasses with the hands.
Right.
I just love that kind of stuff.
Well, I do really like and it says here, which is a big clue for stuff coming up. The time machine, it's rewritten history and turned those Nazis into dinosaurs. The Nazis into dinosaurs part is just the fun part, but the rewritten history is an important clue. Exactly.
And then the bottom panel is the shocking fate of the American Spirit's junior sidekick, which is Jack. You see Kid Vigilante. What was Kid Monstro? Was that right? If that was that his name?
That must be Kid Monstro. Yeah.
And then I don't recognize. Oh, that's. Oh boy, I should have looked it up. The girl there is Power Princess. I don't remember exactly.
Power Princess, Princess Power. Something
yeah, you're right. But then you see Jack, and there's his brain and one eyeball.
Right. Oh, I didn't notice the one eyeball. Yeah, and as I was rereading this, because I didn't fully remember, I was wondering, is Jack literally was in the real world of this comic? Was he really just left with just a brain, and is his whole body something his brain was implanted to, or is he more of a cyborg mix of like the character Cyborg in Teen Titans, with some body parts left other than the brain? And I think I finally get my answer to that in the last or second to last issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Before we turn the page, I wanted to, or move on. I wanted to point out. Notice how young Kid Vigilante looks in that picture.
Right, about 10 or
yeah. So how long has he been doing this? Because we talked about how it was mentioned by Walker that Kid Vigilante is probably 16.
Mm-hmm.
And here he is in this first page, looking like I said, 10 or so.
Right. Yeah, again, there's the question of what are these comics? Are they comics within this world, or are they just some kind of, I don't know, gimmick at the front of this comic? I mean, obviously they are a gimmick at the front of this comic, but whether they supposedly exist in the world of these characters,
Right.
I think I'll never be totally sure on that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, that's something that they could explore if the show if the comic ever comes back. Hey, Damian, we got a couple comments here. Mr. Howlermouse from YouTube. So he says, names like Kid Vigilante, Dino Nazis, could I be in love? And and then a little bit later he says, brain in a jar? Yeah, it's love. So yeah. Howlermouse, it is a labor of love to go through these issues. So if you haven't read Danger Club, you should do so.
Yeah, and maybe you can link your original video, which ended up being marked as private by accident, to this video later for people who will just be watching on YouTube so they can see part one.
Yep, good point.
Howlermouse, for those of you who follow him on YouTube, has a deep understanding of the history of comics. So he will get huge amounts of Danger Club. He will get huge amounts of the subtext of Danger Club that's just full of all this stuff going back to the history of comics.
All right, let's turn the page literally here. And we come into people watching the American Spirit, the president of the global United States, addressing the Union, talking about the menace of these kids, the group that Kid Vigilante is leading, and how comparing them to Nazis, the Nazi menace of the 1940s. He says. And comparing them to Adolf Hitler. I just wanted to point out in this sequence here, Damian, that we have these the teen superheroes. There's a couple panels here. One, they're huddled together. There's 3 or 4 of them. They're huddled around this TV and looks like an abandoned warehouse of some kind. There's another one who's watching this. Looks like an underpass, a highway underpass. And he's watching it on his phone. He's got his backpack or duffel bag next.
They're all hiding in different places.
And two things about that occurred to me about this. One, why are they still wearing their costumes if they are in hiding? And two, do they not have anywhere to go other than off by themselves in these abandoned places like this? Don't they have families that they could hide with? Just those little details that just pop in my brain as I'm reading this.
It does seem that their life as a superhero sidekick took their childhood away, and so they have nowhere to go. Perhaps
that could very well be, yeah. And maybe it's maybe the adult superheroes that disappeared in the crisis that was talked about in the first 4 issues. Just like we found out with Kid Vigilante, his mentor is his father. So maybe a lot more of these characters. Oh, also Gravity Girl, her mom was one of those. So perhaps, a lot of them, it's more than just them having mentors like Robin is to Batman, but they're actually family members. So when they're gone, when those adults disappeared or, died, apparently, they had nowhere to go, perhaps.
Right. Especially now that they've become outlaws from the president, Spirit of Liberty.
American Spirit.
American Spirit. So I kind of am repeating some of this stuff as I'm aware some people are watching. And then we find out that this execution of Kid Vigilante is indeed televised to the country.
Yeah, that president has no qualms about showing that kind of stuff. Could you imagine?
Right.
If that stuff actually happened here? Ugh.
First Obama speaks, then he shows a little execution with brains coming out the back of someone's head, and then he comes back and speaks some more.
Yeah, not something I want to see. Okay, so then we go to the White House. Well, not the White House. Yes, it is the White House. Sorry, we see the ship that attacked the group, or the group attacked. Wow.
Right, the helicarrier.
Yeah.
Type of ship.
but then, oh no, maybe this is actually a reproduction of the Oval Office in this ship, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right.
That just occurred to me as I'm looking at the
not
page.
Totally easy to parse that out, but
Yeah.
I think it is.
So
it's kind of like this helicarrier includes a flying White House inside of it or something.
Mm-hmm. I guess that totally makes sense. It's better than Air Force One, right?
Right.
I just wanted to point out, though, in this scene or this page that we see Yoshimi, and so the 5-inch tall character,
miniaturized Japanese girl,
right?
And at first, I couldn't tell where she was or where she was.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I had the same thought too, because you see that soldier right behind her, and it looks like they're really close together. And so I'm thinking, oh, well, she's somehow captured in this container type thing, and the soldier has her. But then you go to the next page, and you see her jumping down the backside of Jack Fearless's leg. So it looks like maybe she was in his holster.
Right. Yeah, that was just one of those shots when we first see her that is not clear where she is. But anyway, it's cool. So the cool reveal of this scene while they're talking is that things as they seemed in last issue are not what they seem, because if Yoshimi's working with Jack, then Jack hasn't betrayed in some weird way. He hasn't betrayed the other sidekicks.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also in this scene where Yoshimi is heading into a what do you call it? into a vent.
Yeah, some kind of duct that seems to have a lot of electronic work inside of it.
Yeah, and odd that the vent. Okay, I'm nitpicking now, but it's odd that the vent does not have any like grating over it. But it's a perfect size for her. And more amazingly is that, okay, so now we know that she was not being carried by that soldier like I thought. How did the soldier not see her in Jack's holster? And even more so, how does the American Spirit, who is facing Jack, looking right at him, not see Yoshimi running towards that duct, that vent?
You found the fatal flaw in this comic.
I did. So everything is undone now.
Right.
Everything else beyond this is
hooked up to breathing apparatus, busy gloating on his victory.
Yeah, that's very true. But it's just
excuses for that.
It's just one of those little continuity things, I guess, that doesn't quite jibe with me. So anyway, another thing I'll point out on this page, and Damian, I'm just gonna because I don't want to keep you as long as I did last time. I'm just going to go through these really quickly. So if there's anything on here that you want to point out, just jump right in too.
Okay.
So on this page, American Spirit is taking a bit of delight in making Jack repeat this oath. I hereby solemnly swear that I shall support and defend our nation against all threats, foreign and domestic, blah, 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 blah. And as Jack does this, as he's reciting this oath, it becomes quite apparent, especially in the panel at the bottom here. Jack is not happy about doing this.
Right.
In fact, he looks almost pained that he has to say these words to this guy, his former mentor, who has, in his eyes, if you'll pardon the joke, has betrayed him. And of course, American Spirit's not buying it. So he puts Jack to a test and tells Jack to execute Ladybug, and I think her name is Fahrenheit. She's the fire producing superpowered girl.
Yeah, I don't even remember her. Again, the artist or the artist and writer are masters of counterpoint. So when we have him reciting the oath, we're also seeing her, Yoshimi, the tiny girl, running through the ductwork. So we know while he's reciting the oath that he doesn't believe in it, even before we see his face with that expression. And then we see the counterpoint of Yoshimi getting the work she needs done while potentially these other heroes are going to be sacrificed, which again repeats the sense of all these sacrifices that are made to accomplish their mission. I mean, we've seen the big sacrifice earlier where Jack had to kill Kid Vigilante, the planner of the whole mission.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, these kids are amazing that they continue to put themselves in the situation, or these situations where, they could die at any minute. And many of them do, even in the end.
Right.
So it impresses me that they show these, and not just the fact that they're valiant heroes, because that's what we expect in our superhero comics, but that they are also afraid and sometimes unwilling to continue, as we saw with Gravity Girl, and they're just unsure. They're kids, they're teenagers. I would have a difficult time as an adult, even at the advanced age that I am approaching, to I think commit to the things that they are doing. So I just, but that's one of the things I love about we talked last time about my love of teen superheroes, teen sidekicks, and that's one of the things I like about it, is how these young people make this commitment in this fictional world, of course, but they make this commitment to uphold these ideals that they have and help others. I think that's just a fantastic thing that younger people do that. Wish more people would follow in those examples.
And so on the next couple pages, we get Jack refusing to do it. The American Spirit does torture the kids down below, perhaps unto death. And then Jack breaks free and they have a fight. And to me, this is an even stronger sort of representation of this idea of the heroes abusing and betraying their sidekicks. I mean, because obviously the American Spirit is the ultimate betrayer. He's, gone from being Captain America to being Thanos or something, to being Darkseid, someone who the whole universe or multiverse is just a toy of his ego. But so yeah, it just sort of there was an emotional frisson as we realized we've just become to realize from the first page for sure that Jack was the sidekick of the American Spirit and went through awful things with his brain in a jar and then put back into a robot body, and then to be betrayed by the person who turned him into a superhero in the first place, or made him a sidekick.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. If you take in all of these layers, it's a emotionally packed scene, an emotionally packed fight between the two of them.
Mm-hmm. And you're exactly right. So, and the fight is quick, because we find that the American Spirit is not as frail as he appears to be, because he takes on the robotic body of Jack Fearless here. And he knows, American Spirit knows that Jack is a traitor from his perspective.
Right.
And he knows in the next couple of pages, as he's gloating, after he tears off Jack, tears off Jack's arm there, and callously throws it away. He knows that his, as he says, American Spirit says, "What are you and your little friends really up to?" So he suspects something, and yet, words escape me at the moment. Having Yoshimi infiltrate as she did, as shown in the previous pages, and the fact that he totally missed it,
even though he was expecting betrayal.
Exactly.
That's one of those gimmies. We just need to do it that way so that the plot can continue.
Well, and I also think that speaks to American Spirit's hubris. He
right.
Considering what is going to happen here very soon, I think he just thinks it doesn't matter.
Right.
Which is when we did talk about this before too. We brought the question up, why didn't American Spirit round up these kids as well? And I think you pointed out that perhaps he thought that they were not at all a threat.
Right.
And I think he still thinks that, even though he knows they're up to something.
And he went through all of this with Jack Fearless, knowing that Jack was going to betray him, and he's just really enjoying torturing his former student. And I guess I'm distracted by the wrong details, but I'm struck by the fact that inside his robot body is muscle and blood and veins, and then the president tortures him with it.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of going to yet another level of kind of disturbingness in their violence.
Well, yeah, it does speak to your assertion that he's a cyborg instead of just a robot with a brain in the body. But it's funny because things I've read from the creators, they specifically talked about Jack Fearless being in a brain and an eye in a robot body. So,
well, and to skip ahead, he later we see that his face is a robotic face too. So I think I think they just decided to be gross, and they're making a robot body that still has biological parts that you can torture.
Yeah. Let's see here. So I wanted to jump ahead to again. Yoshimi is able to stop the torture of Ladybug and Fahrenheit here. I hope that's who that is. And although providing the same feed of the torture with the stuff that she did inside, where she was ripping up cables and connecting stuff together, and then she says she tells Ladybug it's time to get to work, and Ladybug gets up and says, "Oh, good. I thought this was going to be difficult." It's just that that resignation to the task at hand, even though she just, I mean, she almost died here in this electric chair situation.
Right. She's being very dryly ironic, I suppose.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, you put it in a much better way. In the meantime, Jack is pushing American Spirit's buttons. You know, what happened after the Nazis, after everything we fought against? How much worse are you? And American Spirit says, "Don't you dare judge me. I'm a hero." To which Jack replies, "You think that's what Hitler said?" And then American Spirit just goes crazy and tearing out Jack's cybernetic guts,
which are full of blood, along with the cybernetic parts.
Yeah. Blood and electricity.
Blood in this comic book.
Yeah, yes, they do. Yeah, Rusty. I think. Yeah, I think Rusty has an issue. I say that with love. Let's see here. Is there anything in the next few pages you want to comment on, Damian?
Well, at some point we start getting the alternate reality here in terms of World War II, because the war just went on and on year after year, and we were losing. Japan and Germany, Italy, Canada, Spain, France, they were all too strong. So the reason for Captain America, the American Spirit's corruption, lies in the fact that the war went a different way and the Nazis were going to take over the world. And then he says, the answer came from one of my earliest missions, one of my more colorful enemies, Dr. TikTok's time machine. So in a sense, perhaps he was a real hero until he gave in to the temptation of turning to the time machine to solve his problems, to use the powers of God, or a godlike being, a godlike way of solving problems rather than solving them in a mortal's way of solving them.
Right, and we get that old adage, you know, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So even though I'm sure American Spirit meant to do things for the greater good, he ended up in this situation where he is now, which is obviously a fascistic dictator.
Right. It would be our ultimate weapon, et cetera, but it turned out to be so much more.
Notice too that the way he's kind of coveting that globe, in those scenes, that'll come into play later. We'll talk about that.
Yeah. It is interesting though, here he's not feeble at all. So is all of that a fake? I hadn't thought about that before. If it is fake, whether it,
Well, and so let's assume that it is fake. It's merely for the public eye, his constituents, the countries.
maybe because everyone knows how old he is, so he needs to look that elderly.
Well, and also obviously to just belie what is actually going on. He is gaining in power. We'll find out, and so he just wants to hide that for as long as possible.
Right. And even I love how, I mean, we've had this all along, but it just strikes me again. He's dressed up like the president. He's in the Oval Office, but the one thing is he always keeps his mask on.
Yeah, that's funny.
And it just makes him seem more demented and disturbing. The mask has wrinkles in it even. The mask is almost melded to his face.
Well, yeah, there is a panel on the next couple pages where his eyes are almost, if not fully closed, and this is one of those comic book conceits.
Right. His eyes, when his eyes close, the mask eyes close with him.
Exactly. But that's just one of those comic book conceits, right, about masks. Just like and we talked about this before, but the white eyes, just because it's just a lot easier to do that from an artistic standpoint than to actually draw eyes, pupils and everything. Although I did this, I'm going off on a tangent now, but I like how they've incorporated that into like the Batman characters, to where they're like lenses now, and not just eye slits. Although it depends on the artist, but
so it wasn't just something easy to draw. They've turned it into an actual thing.
It's become part of continuity now. Yeah. Let's see. So Ladybug and Fahrenheit are making their way towards someplace, and I just wanted to point out this brief conversation here between them. So Fahrenheit's saying to Ladybug, he seriously didn't tell you the plan? Ladybug says, right? Not until we were crashing. I mean, who does that? He probably just doesn't totally trust you. I mean, you were his archenemy, and he's kind of a jerk. And Ladybug says, hell with it. We should start our own team. Right. I just love that. Oh, and she says, the punch kid vigilante in the face for being a jerk squad. Yeah, I just
that's a lot of fun stuff in the middle of after we've seen people tortured and
right.
And
so
horrible things.
Yeah, so you get the really serious, gross kind of stuff interspersed with the comedy elements. So it's wonderfully done.
And a reminder that these are sidekicks from the villain side and the superhero side who have teamed up at this point, which I kind of tend to forget as I go along. Mm-hmm. The craziness of this world where every single person has a teen sidekick.
In the meantime, Yoshimi is doing more than just freeing Ladybug, and she is actually, so you see there in the panel that I'm showing on the screen, she is, there's a view of her and then Micro Tokyo in the background, and so she's hacking into something there, and I'm we could guess probably what she's doing. She says, this is Yoshimi Anamoto, you mother effers. You can't keep me out.
Right. Well, and the infinity override is a bit of a clue because there were those robots with the infinity sign on them earlier.
Very true. I missed that detail. Good point. On the next page, there is just a quick panel, and I just wanted to point it out just because it just... the way it's drawn struck me. So you see Ladybug here, and it looks like she gets shot.
Right.
And I thought, oh my God, so there goes Ladybug. But it's also odd in the sense of, I'm not sure, because it looks like she got shot through the like the bottom of her throat. So that led me to believe.
I thought it was the shoulder.
And I'm sure that's what it is, because she's not shown as dead in the next page. But just the way that was drawn, to me, it was a little confusing because it looked more like a kill shot there when I first read it. But of course, as we move on, you find out that, she's hurt, obviously. These poor kids.
Right. Well, and I thought Jack Vigilante was killed in the last scene of him being massacred by the president, but he turns out to still keep going a little bit.
Well, he's like the Energizer Bunny. He just keeps going and going and going.
No matter how much of his guts you rip out.
Exactly. So the girls finally do reach their destination, and she sticks this USB stick into a console in the ship. To what end, I'm not sure yet. Yoshimi hacks into Micro Tokyo's the Gigantobots, and she takes control. And you pointed out, because I mentioned the remote control bitches, and you pointed out last time, Damian, though, that comes into play later, and here it is.
Right.
She says it again.
It's her catchphrase, remote control. So I wonder if Ladybug does die, though, because the last thing we ever see her again? Her hand is bloody, and it's like she's plugged in the USB, and then she's kind of falling to the ground, bleeding everywhere.
Well, yeah, you're right. If you're just going through it page by page like this and not thinking about what comes up, it certainly looks like that she is dead or almost dead, and it makes you wonder, if that was really the implication here. It certainly seems to me to be that way.
We certainly seem to see a lot of people who would surely have to bleed out and die, even if the original wound was not a death blow. Yeah,
and much sooner than it actually occurs. But again, talking about comic book conceits, that's another one, right? It's just
right.
No matter how much.
I couldn't remember if we do see Ladybug again, but I guess we probably do.
We do.
We see her at. She's in the last issue, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's starting to all blur.
Yeah. So there's more words between Jack and the American Spirit, and but then we see, this is the big thing. We see the reveal of Dr. TikTok's time machine, and I just wanted to point that out. How Kirby-esque does that look?
Very intentionally Kirby with those little symbols along the side.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and it's very cosmic. More than a time machine, it feels like that kind of cosmic cube, cosmic awareness type of scene from Marvel Comics in the Bronze Age, to me.
And then the last few pages of this issue, so American Spirit activates that time machine, and you get this scene where he's talking, and things are happening cosmically here. But more importantly to the story, here in that panel, the middle panel here on that page, Damian, that's Ladybug saying, remember what he said. And they all start saying apokatastasis, so that comes back.
Oh, that's Ladybug. Okay, apokatastasis, right. A real easy word to say.
Yeah. In the meantime, American Spirit saying the world will be reborn in his vision, in his image, forever and ever and ever. And that's when the flash of light, and then you get the final page, which is very Crisis-esque. If you remember Crisis on Infinite Earths, you get the universe ending, and everything goes to white except for that bottom panel, which is really interesting. It's almost white, but it's kind of like there's an opaque covering to it, but you can still see there, and it's Magician pointing. I believe he's pointing his wand. Drop my comic there. Pointing his wand at, it looks like Kid Victory in the foreground there, and he's saying,
it's really hard to see clearly, but you're right. And he's saying apokatastasis.
Exactly.
So in the previous podcast, you mentioned, I believe, I can't remember exactly how you put it, but that apokatastasis means renewal or return to the beginning.
Yes.
And I was looking at it a little bit in my rush before this. And apparently it's also a big term in Judaic and Christian theology and in Stoic philosophy.
Yes.
So it's both just a return to the primal universe, but it also has the whole idea of certain concepts, I think, of what the end of God's plan is. Will everything be returned to God and into its state of purity? And there's apparently were big debates amongst theologians in different Christian eras as to whether in apokatastasis even the demons and devils would be returned to being angels again. And I didn't have time to look further into it than that, but I just thought it was interesting that, and I don't know if they're aware of it being something that's debated in obscure theology circles, but I just thought it was interesting, their use of that term, and they certainly use that so much over and over in all the remaining issues that one feels they probably did explore the meaning of that word to some extent.
Well, yeah, I will just tell you, they did. It was very intentional, and we'll talk a little bit more about it because there's a lot more stuff like that coming up in the very next issue,
Right.
which is issue number 6.
Awesome cover. I love that cover. And I guess when we see this cover, we now know Kid Vigilante must not be dead in some form.
It certainly looks that way, doesn't it? Although, yeah,
Although he's in kind of a hellish Hades place. I don't think I picked up on that though when I first saw the cover.
Yeah.
But this is, since we've been talking about this a week or two ago and looking at it more, I'm realizing more and more how much the colorist did add to everything. So many of these covers would be have a completely different effect without the work that Rusty, the colorist, did. Michael Rusty Drake.
Mm-hmm.
So my hat's off to you because I think you realized that before me, how important he was.
Well, I think a lot of times we take the colorist in comics for granted. We focus so much on the writer and the penciler of comics. And Rusty's colors on this series in particular has really opened up my eyes to what a colorist brings to the table and adds to the overall story. So from now on, I'm going to be definitely talking more about the colorist in terms of being an integral part of the story and the success of the story than I have in the past.
Right. Well, I wonder this is total aside, but at what point we'll start seeing some colorists on the copyright pages? Because although they do respect their colorist, this is copyright Landry, Q. Walker, and Eric Jones. But I think one could argue that the colorist, at some point, the colorist's involvement is so intense that maybe they get a piece of the ownership pie even.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's for creators to figure out amongst themselves. Yeah. But certainly colorists have more and more been mentioned on the covers, and he is mentioned on the cover here. His name is written as big as the other two, so they're kind of the big 3 in the credits of this comic.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there are a few other comics I read where I think the colorist is very key. Do you read Black Science?
I did. I do not currently.
When the colorist left and a different colorist took over, my interest in the comic went way down.
Oh.
It was not a bad colorist, but it became different. They changed the art. And that colorist, I think it was Dean White, was kind of a key part of my enjoyment of Black Science.
Well, there you go. Testimony.
Okay, so issue 6, I'll read the front piece. They came to us thousands of years ago, gods, aliens, refugees of a fallen civilization. For centuries they ruled, intermingled with humanity, creating generation after generation of daemons, fairies, and demigods. The first generation of heroes and villains. And then one day, something happened. Something terrible followed our rulers from their lost homeworld. The gods fell, defending the earth. Their empire crumbled, and only the most remote spark of their seed survived within our species. And they never told us what it was they had been running from. They never told us what it was that could frighten a god. So we've had Apollo before, and they kill Apollo, and then he's reborn, and then they beat him up, and they take his blood and leave him to regenerate again. So we've had a sense that there are beings that are more godlike, that Apollo isn't just a name of a superhero. And I think they mentioned that Apollo was the last of the Olympian gods surviving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now we're going to get some more about that.
Yes. And
the fake Silver Age cover says they came from outer space, and it shows Olympian gods, Hades, Zeus, Poseidon. And this seems like the first one that is kind of a mock Marvel comic book page instead of a DC Silver Age page.
Yeah, I noticed that as well.
The artwork is much more Kirby-esque, a little bit and that they came from space. That's much more of a Stan Lee title than a Silver Age DC title.
Yeah, yeah.
Behold the dawn of the Olympic era and its shocking end. I want to read that comic book, by the way.
Right, right.
Much want to read that comic book.
I want just about every retro page that we get, those first pages, and every issue. I want to read that comic.
Right.
They also mentioned the Omphalo Stone.
Right. And I did not pick up on this at all until just now, because in later issues, that Omphalo Stone really is something to pay attention to. And
Exactly.
I did not pick up on it that was on this page.
And I didn't something I didn't pick up on, Damian, when you were just reading this. The frontistext here: their empire crumbled, and only the most remote spark of their seed survived within our species. So these gods, they're the reason that we have superpowers in this world, perhaps.
Apparently, yeah. So the superheroes are a remainder of a remaining seed of some real gods that are part of our distant mythology of our world.
Mm-hmm. And you know,
there's the whole idea of superheroes being the modern mythology anyway.
Exactly. Yes.
And so
yeah, I like that tie-in.
Connecting it in a loop there.
And don't forget Zeus in our own Greek mythology was, you know, a bit of a he got around, is what I'm trying
to say. He liked to spread the seed.
Yeah. Yes, he did. Okay. I wanted to mention, I just saw this too when you were reading. This is the first time that I've seen this in tiny print in the inside cover, under the letters and logos, folks. It says the name Red Vengeance is used with permission from Chris Kemple, and it gives a website. So this is issue 6, and it appears, I just looked as you were talking, it appears in issue 7 as well, but not in issue 8 and not in issue 5. So
is Red Vengeance the Batman-like character?
Yeah, he's Kid Vigilante's father.
I noticed on another page it mentioned Red Vengeance on Facebook, but this one says redvengeance.com.
Right. And so yeah, that's 6, and then 7 has the Facebook address, facebook.com/redvengeancecomic. So, boy, I wish I had seen that earlier, because I would have looked that up and talked about it. But I'll have to check that out at some point. What that's all about. Did Walker and Jones and Drake, did they just use that? You know, because how many superhero names are out there that people have used over the years and or reuse from something else, and then you find out later, oh gosh, this other person has this creation out there, this comic or this web comic or strip or whatever, and they're using that name. It's like, oh, whoops. So maybe retroactively they went and said, hey, we're really sorry about this. We didn't realize that.
Yeah.
or maybe
were they friends with the creator.
Exactly.
So yep. I'm looking at redvengeance.com. I'm having trouble with the website. He looks a bit like a Ultraman-like character.
Okay.
One of those Japanese robotic kind of character. Most of these links aren't clicking.
Maybe that's why they changed it to the Facebook address.
But then they have a whole bunch of other well-known artists who've done drawings of Red Vengeance. Tommy Lee Edwards has drawn him. Mike Rewengo. Jeff Parker has drawn him. I didn't even know Jeff Parker drew.
Okay, so that suggests that they did borrow the name and knew about the history of that name, and then maybe just decided to, or were asked to add a credit on the cover there.
This has the looks of a website that someone did not complete. So only some of the links on it work. So there's not much detail. So the only link on it that works is the gallery, unless my internet provider is blocking it for some reason. I'm not very happy with my internet provider right now. If they have. So yeah. That's funny because there's so little about the Red Vengeance in here. I completely forgot his name was the Red Vengeance.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of keep going back to my assumption he's Vigilante, and that's why his sidekick's Kid Vigilante.
Mm-hmm. Well, there is a prominent.
What was the twin or the other clone's name?
Kid Victory.
Kid Victory and Kid Vigilante. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is very golden age, I think, those kinds of names.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So going on to the issue, so the universe has been recreated from the last issue, and we get an opening scene here of stuff we've seen before, which is, of course, Kid Vigilante being murdered by Jack. But then, as the panels go down on the page, he appears, and he looks like he's in the same place that Kid Vigilante and the Magician visited to get Apollo's blood in an earlier issue.
Right.
So you get that same glowing yellow sphere. I took it, Damian, that's where Kid Vigilante appeared in this realm, and then the ball drops in this on this page, and then he appears at the bottom and starts walking.
Yeah, I did not at this point think the universe was being recreated. I thought we were seeing where Kid Vigilante went after death. Did you say the universe was being recreated?
You're right. I did say that, and you're right. There's nothing to suggest that is
and
the
particularly
situation
as
here.
I flip the page and he's walking through, and there's a voice talking to him about your death, your life, your death. You exist only as long as I will it. That makes me feel he is in. I start suspecting he is in the Greek Hades, the
Yes.
afterlife, the underworld.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I hope I'm not skipping too fast, but then we see Cerberus, the three-headed dog, who guards the gates of Hades, and it's a lot of fun watching Kid Vigilante fight Cerberus. How do you say that? I get confused because they misspelled it in the Cerberus the Aardvark. What's a misspelling of what I call Cerberus?
I thought it was. I don't know. I usually pronounce it Cerberus, but I'm probably wrong about it.
That's right. That's how you do it. I've just got it all mixed up in my head. Cerberus. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a long, fun sequence with lots of blood of him fighting Cerberus.
Yeah, you're right. This issue does almost entirely take place in that realm of that where Kid Vigilante and Apollo are until the very end, and then
Right.
this part of the story catches up with what we saw in the previous issue, and so I was just confusing those things in my brain.
And so we're seeing a lot. We're seeing what he's doing in Hades, and we're seeing his sort of memories that led up to what we now realize was his plan all along. That included his own death.
Right.
So, you had mentioned how at first they thought they'd do this as a 6-issue series, and this is issue 6. And I wonder if once they got to this idea of him being reborn in hell, in Hades, that they wanted to spend more time on it. They didn't want to rush through it so much. Because this does seem like we were rushing through the plot, and now most of the plot is resting for the moment while we see something happening elsewhere and find out more of the backstory of the plan.
Yes, and I'll also point out that I'm pretty certain they were joking, but one of the reporters at Newsarama or Comics Alliance, whichever one, I can't remember, asked them, did you ever basically did you think about just ending it with everything going white? As they did, and like I said, I think they were joking, but they did indicate, that they thought about it. Could you imagine if that's what we got? We got to the end of issue 6, and that's what happened.
Right.
Everything ends, and it goes white, and then we're done. What an unsatisfying ending that would be. And of course, that's what they also said, was that would be hugely unsatisfying for many readers, if not all of us. I wanted to point out.
Here's a horrible confession of mine. I have never read the entirety of Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Damian.
And as we saw at the end of last issue, this is referring to that, and I have a general understanding of Crisis on Infinite Earths, but I just never got through the whole thing.
That's okay.
Do we? I assume this part does not have an equivalent in that.
You mean the part where Kid Vigilante is in this other realm?
Right.
Not a direct one, not to my recollection. Maybe some of the sequences in the antimatter universe could be analogous in some ways, but definitely not in a direct fashion. No.
Right. So I don't know if, because so much of what happens in these comics, I can see the antecedents in the history of comics. This particular issue with, getting yourself killed and sent to Hades, and to rush ahead on what this whole issue is about, rush to Hades to recruit the spirits of the dead gods in your battle. I haven't seen that particular thing in a comic book, but maybe it refers to something.
Yeah. And what a plan. What
what a crazy, scary plan to get literally die.
Last ditch effort. You have to, literally die. Yeah. There's the Joseph Campbell hero's journey, right? That whole process where whether it's usually figurative, but sometimes literally, the hero has to die, quote unquote die, and then be reborn, is transformed, and then comes back and basically saves the day. Well, that's exactly what Kid Vigilante is doing, except he literally did die. Although his spirit.
Good point. And there are tons of fantasy novels and such where the heroes literally have to go down into the underworld, to the land of the dead. For some reason, immediately this Philip Pullman trilogy of his, I remember reading that and hearing interviews with him where he was doing the hero's journey. His Dark Materials, I think, it was a very popular fantasy young adult trilogy. But anyway, usually the heroes are still alive, but somehow find an entrance into the land of the dead.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, he has to literally die. And I feel like Landry and Rusty, really go to town on their artwork of showing us Hades. The mythology lover in me really enjoyed these sequences.
Yeah.
Beautifully done, beautifully drawn and colored, and in the way, not even though there's Kirby references elsewhere, this is not the way Kirby would have done it. It's very unique to them, I guess, or at least not drawn from Kirby in this case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I too was struck by the whole connections to Greek mythology, or just the blatant reproductions of stuff from Greek mythology. So, because I loved that as a kid.
Yeah. And comics have often had great connections to mythology, but this is just done really well. And we talked about how the Olympic pantheon shows up in a couple of issues of the Teen Titans, in fact.
Right.
And of course, they're through and through Olympic and Norse mythology keeps reappearing in Marvel comics all the time.
Right. I want to just jump back for a quick discussion about there's a flashback scene here between Kid Vigilante and Red Vengeance, and they're in that same room with Kid Victory in that tube, that stasis tube that was referenced in the previous volume of the comic. And Red Vengeance is such a dick in this.
Totally.
Yeah. So he talks about how Kid Vigilante, your brother was our best hope for the future. All my plans, my son. Now all I have is you, referring to Vigilante, and I'm afraid you won't be enough. And that final panel where Red Vengeance walks away, and with Kid Vigilante standing there. And basically there's nothing in the background. You see the floor a little bit, but it fades into white in the top. And just the way the shadow extends, trying to connect, with his father, and it's not quite reaching. It's just, wonderfully done by Jones and Drake, showing that.
Very good point. That is an amazingly good panel, and it just emphasizes the emotional gut punch of your father saying you're not good enough.
Yeah. And what teenage boy especially hasn't felt that disconnect with the father, and the pang of wanting to be able to live up to the father's expectations
Right.
and please the father, and knowing that you can't or won't be able to for some reason. Yeah, this is familiar territory.
Yeah. And I can't. Do they ever say that he's a clone? Because that's kind of where I wondered when he says he refers to the other brother as my son. Like, is Kid Vigilante a clone of Kid Victory? Or maybe that's just not important, but I keep wondering if there's some other clue that I saw and then forgot. That
No, you're right. There is something later in this issue that I was going to point out. I think it's in this issue where that's discussed. So,
right.
Go ahead.
Well, and eventually, beyond the emotional abuse, eventually to prepare his lesser son for this thing, he puts him in a contraption, and Kid Vigilante says, "Will it hurt?" And the father says, "Yes, more than you can possibly imagine." And then he pulls the switch, like as if, "I'm happy to hurt. I have no problem with you going through unimaginable pain to fulfill my plans."
Yeah. So if you look at that panel there, he just says yes, and just the look on his face, it's almost like contempt that this boy would ask that question.
Right.
And maybe I'm just reading into it, but
so it feels again kind of this emotional abuse and physical abuse of children to me. And then
that's right.
This is a great image, which I feel like I still need to go back and study for all that's probably packed in here, of the visions that Kid Vigilante is given by his father's machine that is giving him unimaginable pain.
Right. So we should probably step back though and explain that just a little bit. So basically, there's two stories going on here. You get the main timeline, which is Kid Vigilante and Hades fighting Cerberus and heading towards Apollo. Apollo's freaking out about that. We'll come back to that. But then there's the flashback that we've been talking about, and Vigilante's talking to Red Vengeance, and Red Vengeance talks about that the mathematical equation that this Weisinger's theorem of multidimensional transcendence. You've read this, right? And Vigilante says, of course. Then you understand the equation that proves an infinite number of alternate universes should exist. And this is very important to the whole story. And yet they do not. What we can detect are simply echoes, the energy signatures of non-existent alternate versions of Earth. Every other world in the universe is constant, while the Earth is in a state of flux. Furthermore, it appears that instead of coexisting in harmonic synchronicity, just like the parallel Earth concepts of the DC universe, we talked about or it's been talked about in many different comics over the past 75, well, not 75 years, but since the Silver Age dawned in DC Comics, that each parallel Earth is on a different plane, but has a different vibrational synchronicity, anyway. Continuing on, every reality is built instead upon the bones of the last. Every new Earth overwrites the previous. And Red Vengeance reveals that he spent decades analyzing this energy. He's allowed to decode a temporal echo of the next event, the next one, and then we get that scene where the heroes are all standing there in fear and awe, and just before they die, and that's something that we talked about in the last discussion.
Right.
So he says, "My life, the lives of all my allies will be lost. We will not survive the crisis that lies before us."
I'm glad you brought us back to this page, because in my rushing ahead, I forgot that this is where this information was. Already we know this is a commentary on all kinds of comic book things, but now this focuses us on a commentary on a certain aspect, or maybe two aspects of comic book history. Clearly, this is a reference to the Crisis on Infinite Earths and all the other things that have come after that, right? There's been so many permutations since then of the ideas about infinite Earths. It's kind of now, see, here's my flaw. At the end of Crisis of Infinite Earths, do they shrink it all back down to one Earth again?
Yes. The multiverse becomes
so
a
kind
monoverse.
of like we've just found out that the Crisis of Infinite Earths happened and someone shrunk us back down to one Earth. But it's also a theme that then gets developed more and more, I think, of looking at the history of comics as people keep getting rewritten and rebooted. There's all these past selves that aren't quite the same. And so even without the Crisis of Infinite Earths, just if you took superheroes as a reality, as we've seen in comic books, some outside force has come in and kept rewriting us, meaning the creators of comics.
Right. Yeah. This series gets very meta at times.
Right. So this is where a new meta thread is made explicit, which I think becomes for me the main thing on the meta level that goes on for the remaining 2 issues after this before the series ends.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned just now the crisis and everything that's come after it. In my notes, I put here every new Earth overwrites the previous, and then I put Crisis, 0 Hour, 52, Infinite Crisis, Final Crisis, Flashpoint, Secret Wars.
Right.
Those are just the ones off the top of my head. You know,
Convergence, multiversity.
Yeah, exactly.
That's happened recently.
Exactly. There you go. Let's see here. So they continue talking. Oh, this is important too. So I just said 52. Between then and now, this is Red Vengeance talking. This fluctuation of antimatter, and that's really important to Crisis itself. Antimatter has appeared at least 51 times, and so there's the next one,
right?
52. I just love that. I just love that the meta stuff of it. I mean, it's obvious if you're a fan of superhero comics and you follow a lot of different comics. But I wonder how, if someone is coming into this series not having a lot of history with say DC and Marvel, especially DC, how much is it important? Maybe if they don't get it, or is this merely one of those kinds of Easter eggs where, when you and I go to a Marvel or DC movie and or watch, a superhero show on television, they throw in those Easter eggs where, to people who don't know this history and don't know these characters, it's just this thing there, this detail that's not important to them, but for us, we get all squee about it.
Well, I think it also reveals, I think even if you didn't know all of that, I think there's it's kind of cool that it's revealing that, because we already learned that the president, the American spirit, has been busy rewriting history with his time machine. So it just sort of confirms that that kind of cool plot, if you didn't even know about Infinite Crisis and all of that, the plot, the idea of someone who's rewritten history over and over again, and we vaguely think something's wrong and something's wrong with the world, and then we discover, oh, it's been rewritten 51 times since 1940 or something like that, and that's why. So that's a cool idea. One can also imagine like someone who uses a time machine to rewrite history keep fixing little details, would slowly go, of course there's another explanation for what's wrong with him, but slowly go crazier and crazier over time as they keep trying to fix the world and instead become more and more of this mad dictator of the world.
Actually, I would have loved to have seen that story instead of what we get, as in terms of why he's doing this and for what reason. Right. That actually,
Me too.
Makes a more interesting
That's
story.
What I thought we were heading towards in this issue.
Okay. See, I wasn't even thinking along those terms as I was reading this.
So in my first reading of this, as we get revealed exactly who the American Spirit is, I think in the next issue, I was very disappointed with that explanation. I appreciate it more now with the rereading, because I'm, like noticing the details with they came from space and all of that kind of thing. So I still have more problems with the last issues of this than with the rest of the series, but I like it better now on the reread than I did the first read.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You mentioned, Damian, the rewriting time since you said 1940s or something. But Red Vengeance does, here's another Easter egg, here's another throwback. He says, I've been able to trace the energy signature backwards in time as far as October of 1956.
Why didn't I catch that?
Damian, what happened in October 1956? Do you remember?
That is in essence the first reboot of the DC universe, when the Silver Age. Who was the first? Was it the Flash or was it someone else?
Yes, that is when.
So that's the official beginning of the Silver Age.
Yep.
And it's when DC decided to revive their superheroes, but redo them. So the Flash before that was not Barry Allen. Who was he?
Jay Garrick.
Jay Garrick, and he got his powers from Mercury, and they redid him as with a new costume as Barry Allen, who got his powers from lightning striking some chemicals and spilling all over him.
Yeah.
And ever since then, we've constantly redone who the superheroes are, what they look like, and everything. That's happened multiple times. Yeah. So that is a huge Easter egg that I missed, for even more explicitly saying to the experienced reader, we are commenting on the comics.
Well, there's a lot of things on these 2 pages that I have noted here. I mentioned the antimatter and crisis. We talked about the start of the Silver Age with the appearance of Flash. Also, they talk about the global war, how it ended with the miniaturization of Tokyo. I in my notes I said, is that a nod to Brainiac? You know, those old Silver Age stories where Brainiac shrunk all those cities.
Right, I'm sure it is, and of course it's a nod to Hiroshima and Nagasaki in a way too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But instead of ending the war with a nuclear bomb, we end it with some kind of super science from comic books.
Yes. Yes. Let's see. No, I guess that was it. I just wanted to point out those few things. So, and there's just a lot in some of these pages. There's that same page where we're discussing those details, but notice that Kid Vigilante, how he's reacting to what Red Vengeance is saying. And it's not the enormity of the situation. It's not the fact that the universe is going to apparently die. It's that Red Vengeance himself, as Kid Vigilante says, whispers, "You're going to die." Right. Just that emotional connection is just another
puppy loves his father.
Yeah. 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 Wow.
It's also, I mean, again, it's not played up, but I can imagine a cool comic book centered around discovering that your own persona has been rebooted 51 times in the past. I keep getting rewritten.
They could do so many miniseries, 6-issue whatever stories about every little thing that we're pointing out in this universe. And I would buy them all.
Yeah. You could take a very kind of Philip K. Dick approach to the rebooting of comics if you went deep into the character's experience of being rebooted.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I want them to write that story, damn it.
Maybe you will have to write that story.
Maybe, yeah. I want to jump ahead here to this page where so Kid Vigilante is making his way through Hades towards Apollo, and then we get this splash page showing towards the top and moving down towards the center of it. You get these Greek gods, and I wanted to mention this before, but it wasn't appropriate at the time we were talking. But notice how everybody who is talking in these text boxes, they all have different colors, and right. It's not quite clear on this page, but if you look at the busts of these gods, they have their symbols, their sigils, and they're the same colors as the text boxes that correspond on the page. So I thought that was a nice way to tie the god to who is talking, and we've been seeing that throughout this issue.
In my copy, I can't. One is yellow, but the rest I can't really make out the color.
On that page,
it's where you can see that better.
Yeah, on that page, it's really hard.
Flip another page or so, and the colors are more.
Yep, there you go. Yeah, here's a better view of it where the colors are much more distinct.
Right.
And so what we have here is, since we both love the Greek gods, Damian, I wanted to just point these out. So we have Hermes and Artemis, who is traditionally Apollo's sister. So that's Artemis, Hermes. I'm going to come back to the lady with the yellow circle there. And then on the right side of that page, there was Mars. Oh, sorry. Ares. I don't want to, they're not Roman gods, they're Greek gods. Ares and, oh gosh, who is that? That is, hold on. I gotta look at my notes here.
Oh, you figured out who they all are? I mean,
well, I'm guessing Aphrodite and Athena is the other one. So I looked up all of the symbols.
And Zeus are not here.
Well, these are the children of Hera and Zeus, including Apollo. So it's. Right. Well, wait. Ares is not. I can't remember my.
Ares would be a brother of Zeus.
Well, but in some of the stories they were. Never mind. I'm forgetting my Greek mythology, but you're right. So maybe
there could be many different versions too.
Because I was thinking that in some cases, they were brother. Well, no, like Zeus and Hera technically were brother and sister, but then they married, if I remember my mythology correctly. So maybe I'm getting that confused with.
Right. People were always marrying their sisters.
Yeah.
Well, there was no one else in existence to marry, right?
Exactly.
Because they were the only ones who existed.
Okay, so maybe that is Hera there, but I was thinking in terms of the children of Zeus and Hera. So I wondered if it was Demeter or Hestia. I wasn't quite sure who that particular character was.
Right. And you said you were going to come back to the one that kind of has an anarchy symbol.
Yeah, that's who I'm referring to. The one with the yellow symbol. Uh-huh. So that's a symbol. That's a symbol for Earth. And so I was thinking, well, that's not really Hera's symbol from my interpretation. So I was thinking maybe it's Gaia, but Gaia is more of Gaia's a
Titan, so she's a sister of Kronos.
Exactly, and the mother of Zeus. So that didn't make sense. So then I thought, well, who are the other Earth-related Greek gods that were that was the daughter of Zeus and Hera, and so that led me to Demeter or Hestia. It might be somebody else. I just couldn't find another.
Is that even
female?
Name. It's kind of ambiguous.
Well, that's true. I did take it to be female, but you're right. It could be another. But it being Earth, an Earth symbol based on my research, Earth is usually associated with a female presence. So that's what I took it as.
Right. Well, what we're doing is kind of like a DVD commentary track here, but it would be great if the creators of this book did one.
I did think about tweeting at these guys and asking them some of these questions. So I probably will do that in the future and maybe do a commentary on our commentary with that information.
But at least one comic book creator does make a sort of audio podcast like commentary track on each issue, and that is Xander Cannon on Kaiju Max. So you can listen to him for an hour or more talk about what he was thinking with each page of each issue of Kaiju Max.
Oh, that's neat. I haven't read that, so I might have to check that out.
I'm kind of an addict to Kaiju Max. The first 6 issues just ended. He's on a break. He's calling them seasons, so season 2 is coming up next year. So I assume the trade will be coming out soon. Completely different from this, but a very cool and unique comic book. But back to this.
So you brought up the whole whether the whole clone situation or whatever, and that's on the next page. That's where they talk about Red Vengeance talks about this was meant to be your brother's mission. When I cloned you both, right. His DNA was altered, his brain mutated so that he could slowly process the temporal data. Since you're his twin, the same could be done for you, but your creation was not intended for that purpose. So
that explains a lot more of Red Vengeance's saying you're not good enough and such. Even though, because of the withholding of that information, we focused on the emotional effect on Kid Vigilante. We now understand more why Red Vengeance, he created these two kids as tools,
Yeah.
not as children, even
Still.
though they are perfectly human.
Still, he's such a dick.
He is totally a dick.
You know, Batman gets a lot of grief in continuity from his family about not being emotionally connected and whatnot. Right. And this guy puts Batman to shame in that department. I have to say.
Frank Miller would like this Batman, though.
Well, you know, Dark Knight 3 is coming, so we'll see. We'll see how it compares.
I'm very excited about that.
Okay. So Vigilante finally reaches Apollo. Apollo is freaking out.
Right.
With what, you know, basically he drops to his knees saying, "Please, I can't read backwards."
I don't blame him. I mean, he's been sort of beaten in a torturous kind of way multiple times by Kid Vigilante now. So he's kind of a whipped dog in a way, even though he's.
Please don't hurt me anymore.
Right.
You know, you talked before, Damian, about how maybe Kid Vigilante isn't necessarily the hero of the story, and just this scene makes me really question that idea of him being the hero of the story, because of the way that, like you say, you know, he's been he tortured Apollo. He tortured Apollo at least twice, and it looks like he might be doing it again for some reason.
Right. And
here's Apollo on his knees, supplicated to this other character who has no superpowers, and yet he's afraid and he just doesn't want to be hurt anymore. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Considering where we started with Apollo at the very beginning of this series with issue number 1, and then we get to this point, my heart just goes out to this character. Yeah. But of course, Vigilante does say, I didn't come here to fight you, even though, you know, he's got this sword and shield, and he's been fighting his way through Cerberus and these spirits. You know, I came here to save you. So that's, at least there's that.
Right. Well, so then after this scene where Apollo is, you know, a beaten dog because of all the torture he's gone through, then we go back to seeing Red Vengeance for his purely unemotional plans. You know, the side effect of that is to torture Kid Vigilante. So it's almost a cycle of cruelty or stuff. But it's funny because I feel like we intentionally or unintentionally constantly flip-flopped on our feelings about Kid Vigilante. He also has all these Christ-like moments. He's even in kind of a Christ-like pose when he said, "I came here to save you," in this final moment with
you're right
there.
And then couple that with the next page where he's strapped on that table, and it's
right,
kind of
he's the son being sacrificed by his father. Like Jesus.
My God. I was not going down that path when I was rereading this, but it became very apparent as you were talking. Wow. See, now I really want to go talk to Eric Jones and whatnot.
To be tortured to death.
Yeah. So then Kid Vigilante gets the knowledge, the foresight. So that in my notes I said that's his superpower. He really does have a superpower. It's just a different kind.
Right.
And then we see there's the big reveal of the big bad in this, and that is Kronos, the Titan.
Right. Do we understand fully what he is yet, or does it take till next issue?
Well, I think
Chaos. Do they say? Oh, they do say Kronos.
They do, but you have to know your Greek mythology to understand what that means to the characters in the situation.
Right. And of course, these are Greek mythology who we've been told are aliens who once acted as gods upon Earth, but now are sort of dead, but still in this afterlife in Hades.
Mm-hmm.
So this version of Kronos may be slightly different than the Kronos of Greek mythology. This is another incredibly cool drawing and coloring by our art team.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that. I was going to do that myself.
I guess who Kronos is linked to perhaps is not revealed to the next issue.
That's correct.
And then we get the whiteout effect again, bringing up the whole crisis kind of thing. And we get the word apocastasis again.
Yep. Again, several times.
Maybe if I take my glasses off, I can see what's going on in the fade of that panel. It's kind of a similar panel to the panel of the last issue, sorry, I had to take my glasses off and peer at it close.
Yeah, I kind of lost you on the audio there, Damian.
Did you lose me on the audio? I'm sorry. I was just saying it's a similar panel to last time,
right?
But more of a close-up.
Yes.
And I had to take my glasses off to see it. This creative team's reminding me how old I am. So with my regular vision, I don't see enough. I had to take my glasses off and peer really closely at this panel to see what it was. So it's some kind of tie back to issue 5, where we also end with a fade out and a fading in close up of the magician doing something magical to Kid Vigilante.
Well, Kid Victory, actually, in this case.
Oh, was it Kid Victory?
Yeah.
How did you know that?
If you because it's the, you can see the mask that on his mouth, the breathing apparatus on his mouth that we saw in the stasis tube.
Wow, you were way better at interpreting faint visuals than I am.
It's really hard to see.
That I could see that could be interpreted that way, and that you are right, but I missed that. So at the end of issue 5, was that also Kid Victory?
Yes.
Okay.
At least that's how I took it.
Right.
Okay, let's
dive
right in.
We see the magician on the next cover, which is another incredible coloring job. Without the color, this cover probably wouldn't have much effect. But
I think, Damian, this is my favorite cover just because of that. Just all those colors, the reds, the yellows, the cool colors on the bottom. And by cool, I mean, the blues and stuff. But just that's just a wonderful, wonderful cover. I mean, think about cover placement in a comic book shop. That having that facing you on the stand, that just pops right out. That's a wonderful, wonderful construction. That's a great cover. And it just occurred to me just now, if you know your DC stories, your crisis stories, this is really reminiscent of, say, the Spectre in DC mythology, helping to recreate the universe, the DC universe in Crisis. Not quite the same thing, because they do the hand thing in that, but having the magician here with his hands over the earth and bigger than life, literally, in this image, bigger than the earth itself, with the energy all around him and stuff. It's just it's very Crisis-esque,
right,
in my mind.
So I have actually purchased and downloaded all of the digital editions of Crisis on Infinite Earth. I love the artwork, but when it came out, because of my age, I had moved on as a comic book reader, and I was not, whenever I saw comic books that just had hundreds of heroes in them, which I would have loved at an earlier age, I was totally, that's for kids, I don't want to read it. Which was obviously a mistake with Crisis on Infinite Earth.
See, I was the opposite. The more heroes, the better. I love that from a kid on. Just give me a series with a ton of heroes, and I'm happy. It may not be the best story, but it visually it pleased me.
By the mid '80s, what I was looking for was more Frank Miller style Daredevil and more Swamp Thing and stuff. And when I saw a huge gathering of superheroes like Secret Wars and this, I just thought, this is just a gimmick to attract kids, like I once was. The very first comic book I bought because there were tons of heroes on the cover. I picked the comic that had the most superheroes on the cover. But,
see, it works. That strategy works.
As a kid, and you just get I got a little jaded about it. But it was probably a mistake with skipping Infinite Earths. And so I'm enjoying reading it. It's a little it's a little dry compared to something like this.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's very plot driven,
Yeah.
whereas this series has a lot more emotion at the core of it.
It's a stunning artistic feat by George Perez. It might
Oh my
be
gosh,
his
yeah.
ultimate. I mean, it's just mind-boggling what he does in that comic. So it's kind of dangerous to try to compare your comic book to that one. But I don't know, maybe the thinking of how much work went into the coloring of this cover. I mean, whether done by hand or digitally, either way, there's not many shortcuts in putting in all those colors in there.
There's got to be so many. I assume it's digital. I can't imagine this not being anything but digital. But how many layers and blends, and I'm quickly running out of terms to use because I don't know all that stuff. But it's just I can imagine that the complexity of the coloring job for just that cover was just enormous.
Right. It's a labor of love for sure from the colorist.
Yeah.
And not hack work or not work for hire. Okay, I'll read the front piece again. This one's a bit shorter than the others. Listen, everything you remember is wrong. 3 months. Now that's quite something to be told in issue 7 of an 8-issue series. 3 months ago, the universe was in deadly peril. Our mentors, our guardians, and our parents. They were summoned to battle a great and terrible evil. They left us in charge, and we died.
Dun, dun, dun.
But then, well, maybe you want to describe what we see next after reading that grim stuff.
Can I please? Oh, I love this so much. So in my notes I have here, and I have exclamation points after everything. 90s comics, Rob Liefeld, extreme. I mean, and look at Kid Vigilante here, jumping there, looking very Rob Liefeld-esque, and the big mouth and the pouches, and
yeah, there's pouches everywhere.
it's just so crazy, and what's really fun, and it even says extreme on here on this image too. That I just noticed. I was never big into Image Comics when it first launched, so I really missed out on reading just about everything that they did when they first launched. So I've since seen some things over the years. I've read a few things, but I was never into it. I was never a fan of it. So I kind of like you. So maybe like we talked about in the previous discussion, you got into reading comics a few years before I did. And so I think I was at the point that you just described about the time that Image hit. And so I was starting to look at the Frank Miller stuff. And, I read Dark Knight and Daredevil when it was coming out then. But, I was looking for more comics like that at about the point that Image hit with its stuff. But I can appreciate the...
Right. Image did not offer up emotional complexity or sophisticated plots. They offered up action. And if you were the right age, I think the Image age probably was, incredibly exciting.
Oh, yeah.
But neither of us were at the right age.
Nope. I missed it. But
I bought a few of the first issues. I think I stuck with Spawn for 3 or 4 issues. I stuck with Savage Dragon for a little while because that was a bit Kirby-esque, so I could kind of get into it that way. But I was just aware of how popular these comics were.
Yeah, definitely I was too. And the only I did get a couple issues of Spawn when they came out, but I only got those, Damian, because they were written by Neil Gaiman and Alan Moore. Those 2 issues, 1 issue each that they wrote.
2 issues in when already he realized he couldn't write very well.
Or somebody did. Okay. So that was just a great image to go from what we've seen.
This artist, it's the same artist, and he even signs it in a Rob Liefeld style there. Jones.
Yeah. I love it. It's so cool.
They capture the early computerized coloring effect where
oh, you're right.
Looks awful to us.
Damian, I've lost you.
Out. Did I freeze up on your end, or did
You
you
did.
freeze up?
You,
Hello? Am I
are you there?
I am there, but I guess
Okay.
not.
Okay. I lost you right after you started talking about the 90s coloring job.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess, as I said, I have complaints with my internet provider lately. I was just saying how excited everyone was back then that you could put a gradient in a comic book. And Image and eventually the other people, glommed onto that. And we got some what now seems like awful coloring to us now. And a lot of people still hate computer coloring, I think, because of the memories of that, because I think it's gotten so much better again. But.
Oh, yeah. Huh. Okay, so let's move on to the issue. So this is where I was thinking. I was jumping ahead an issue, Damian. This is where the universe is reborn. We join that.
Right.
So after issue 5, we come back to the universe as well. Actually, this is just a new universe. But as we scroll through the pages, we find, oh look, this is the 90s Image-esque version of these characters.
Right. I was a little confused as to what we were supposed to make of this.
Yeah.
Is this bleeding person here? Is that the president?
That is
American Spirit.
Yeah, and yeah, he does look different, other than the fact that he's wearing the robe and he's got, I presume, this blood. It's really dark compared to the blood that we've seen before, but he also looks a bit younger too in this. I mean,
so this kind of implies that those Liefeld era heroes were actually villains and not heroes, right? Because they are all working for the evil president now.
Well, I actually, yes, because it does say
one thing I kind of took away from that.
Monsters, demons, servants of a dark force. This is what we had become. I kind of took it, though, too, that maybe they were also being controlled to some degree.
Right.
Not necessarily that they were.
They had been rewritten by the American Spirit.
Yes.
But on the meta level, they're saying that our 90s Rob Liefeld version is what the evil us looks like. I thought it was an extra jab at that period.
Ooh, we might get some letters, Damian.
There are people out there who still love Todd McFarlane, and I don't hold that against them, because I love people who came at the right time for me.
Yeah, yeah.
And he has a lot of talents as an artist. Rob Liefeld, have a little more trouble.
I don't disagree with you there. We go to another scene with Magician. Again, he's in that interdimensional space outside of time. And what I wanted to point out was this splash page here, where we get these 3 bubbles showing versions of these characters, which I thought was really interesting. So you have at the top, you have what I don't know how you took it, Damian, but those look more like it's Silver Age, but kind of Marvel-esque in the way I draw an equation or a line from how Robot 9 looks and the early Iron Man in Marvel Comics.
Yeah. So it may be an early 60s version. Yeah.
And then it jumps ahead to, we see the 90s versions of these characters that we just saw in the previous pages. And then it goes to the version that we have been seeing and experiencing thus far, right, which is well, I'll just say the modern age.
The 90s version of Jack Fearless is incredibly like Cyborg from the New Teen Titans.
Oh yeah, you're right.
And then I flipped back and realized, yeah, I didn't notice that. I was so distracted by pouches, but he's much, in the big splash page, he's much more of a cyborg looking character.
And Ladybug here too. Just, I know we're making commentary on this, but Ladybug has basically a bikini, an ultra thin waist.
Right. And the other character is basically naked with flames covering her pubic region. Right.
And then we have this other character here, the blue, light blue, or the various blues.
I don't recall him.
Yeah, so suddenly he appears in this, And I believe the girl that you mentioned that is basically naked. So that's Fahrenheit again.
Right. I assumed she was Fahrenheit.
And there's a scene coming up where she says, "What have you done with my brother?" And so I assume that's him. So she's fire and heat, and he's, I'm assuming, cold.
Right.
Whatever his name is. But it's
clue tracking.
Yeah, it's kind of odd though that we have. I mean, Fahrenheit we've seen a little bit as we've gone through, and she's become more and more prominent in these scenes. But this guy, I don't recall, and I did flip back through the issues really quick, but I did not see him being featured in the issues so far. But suddenly he's here for some reason. It's just an oddity. I just wanted to point it out.
Right.
But it doesn't matter because he disappears basically after this, I think, until the very end.
Well, and so while the magician is looking at these bubbles showing different versions of the heroes, just to kind of skip over it, he says, "We've been unaware, blind until now. Now we can see." So now they are, whatever they have done has made at least the magician and Kid Vigilante aware of all the different permutations, all the times they've been rewritten and redrawn.
And not just those two. Jack Fearless says something about this coming up that makes me think that he's also aware. So
at this point, or is there something that happens later that makes everyone aware of it?
No, I'll point it out when we get to it.
Okay.
So I think it's clear. Well, it's clear to me that Kid Vigilante. Remember when they were going down in the jet, and he's like, listen to what I have to say. I think that's when he revealed this stuff to him. So
we have the magician kind of floating around and seeing things in this space in between, and then the color changes, and we're seeing the American Spirit. I don't know. Does he have a name other than American Spirit?
He is referred to as President Williams at one point.
Oh, Williams, okay. Which is kind of like Rogers, Steve Rogers.
Yeah.
He's in his own Jesus Christ angelic pose. So the thing I wasn't clear here is this just a flashback for us, or are other characters seeing when this happened, or is this happening now? I assume it's what happened in the past.
Actually, I took it to be this is what's happening right now.
Oh, okay. So up till this point, the American Spirit was his own entity, and this is the point at which he allows Kronos to enter his body to somehow give him immortality in exchange. Is that how you interpreted it?
Yeah, I think that's how American Spirit sees it. That is not exactly what happens, which is actually a common trope in these situations where you essentially sell your soul to a demon, where you think you're getting this one thing and you actually get another thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's what it is, but it's very it's not very direct in the way that it is presented here. But obviously, it's American Spirit says, "Take my mortal shell, give me immortality." So he expects something out of this. Give me eternity, he says, and that's not how I took the end result.
See, but these later issues, it's just harder to interpret what's happening. And I thought this was happening in the 90s, basically, in an earlier incarnation, and that this was a flashback that the magician was becoming aware of. And in fact, we see kind of a version of the magician, his astral form, go into his 90s form with the jacket on. I like that detail of the jacket too. A lot of heroes had jackets back in the 90s.
That's right. No, you know what, Damian, I think you're right. I think, so what happened...
I don't know if I'm right. I'm just saying what I interpreted at the time I read it.
Well, because in issue 5, American Spirit activates that time machine, and we get the flash of white, and presumably the universe is being rewritten, reborn. We get this new version of the universe where these characters who had been fighting him now are under his thrall, or at least have some sort of allegiance to him in some fashion. We, as you pointed out, magician, his spirit does enter into his 90s version of his body, but then as we go forward, he does. There is another change coming at the end of this issue. So I think you're right. I think this is, well, it's if it's not the past, it is a recreation of a version that has gone on before. At least that's how I see it.
You know, it's
now.
possible by sending, because they knew this was going to happen. So now I'm rewriting it in my mind as happening now. They knew this was going to happen, so they sent the magician outside of reality so he wouldn't be affected by the changes.
Or at least being able to affect change in that reality.
So in the present, the president, Williams, has just rewritten reality to be like the 90s, to look like the 90s. And these are the versions of all the superheroes that are now under his control. But the magician, is that his name, the magician?
Yeah.
Comes from outside of reality where he's been waiting and retakes over his remade self and turns it back into his self that has self-awareness and self-control. Mm-hmm. Because he says apocastasis, and then he says in between that, an idea that originated between moments, outside time and space, outside this broken reality, forever beyond the great evil that wants to devour us. So by going outside of reality and then coming back into his body, he's freed himself from the reality-changing controls of President Williams / Kronos. Mm-hmm. So it is just at this moment that President Williams is, in the present moment of the comic book, is fulfilling his bargain, I guess, with Kronos, to let Kronos take over reality and in exchange give him immortality.
Yeah.
Which seems obvious. You let someone take over reality, they'll do whatever they want with you. So it seemed like President Williams should have figured that one out.
He's not very smart on that level, is he?
And then we see President Williams' body being transformed into Kronos, which is very cool. And again, the purples that you've talked about before, the amazing purples that Rusty is able to make work so well.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to point that out too. So when we first see American Spirit here earlier in the issue, where he's actually starting the process to bring Kronos into the universe. So we have those same purple colors, but also in the background we have sort of greenish colors.
Right.
And so one of the shorthands of early comic books in terms of coloring for what is a villain? Well, a villain wears purple or green.
Right.
Right. So I don't know if that was intentional here. It has to be. Mm-hmm. But I love that again, that meta connection here.
Right.
But yes, you're right. The way that Jones and Drake have shown the transformation of American Spirit into this creature that we see on the pages, it's wonderfully done. Again, like you said, the purples. It's almost like a Hulk-like transformation in a way too.
Right.
Until you get this splash page here showing Kronos is here.
Right.
And he kind of looks like the Anti-Monitor a little bit too, in my mind.
You know, I've seen different versions of the Anti-Monitor, but because I'm pacing myself through the original Perez, I haven't seen Perez's version of the Anti-Monitor yet.
Well, and he has a few different looks
so far.
He has a few different looks as the series progresses as well.
So, yeah, and eventually it's revealed, you know, he's far bigger than Godzilla. He's like a huge, literally a Titan walking around.
Yeah.
So I think on rereading it, this is all very brilliant and clever, but at the time I was disappointed because I wanted the American Spirit to be the bad guy, and replacing him with Kronos seemed to up the stakes to such a high cosmic level that in a sense I stopped caring as much, especially on my first reread. But I can see what they're doing here, and it, like you said, that it plays in with the Anti-Monitor, and it plays in with all the sort of cosmic levels above levels above levels when you start doing these multiversal things. I mean, we can see it in Grant Morrison's latest multiverse books too.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you feel as you headed towards the end of this issue?
The first time I read through it?
First time and then now.
It was, I don't know, I kind of, not that I knew exactly what was going to happen, but it seemed, the writing was on the wall from earlier issues that we would get a cosmic level thing, an event of some sort, if not, an actual independent being, in the form of Kronos. So I was kind of expecting something like this anyway. I didn't mind it at the time. The first time I read through it, I was just happy to have the issue in my hand and be reading it again. So, but like you said, upon another read, or in my case, I've read this issue several times now, especially in the last few weeks. I just appreciate it a lot more, and I like. Well, I said earlier, I like that idea of the American spirit being the bad guy, and the whole manipulating time and how that would transform him, and I like that idea for that story. I also like this one. I like the fact that we have this, the book starts, the series starts with a cosmic, or at least implies a cosmic level event with the heroes all disappearing out in space. And then it builds up to this cosmic level event, which is a multiversal, or at least a universal, possibly a multiversal extinction level event. So I appreciate that on that level.
Right. And well, with my reread, I can see the seeds they were planting, and that this all was aiming more towards the Crisis on Infinite Earths sort of venue. Then I realized at first where it was going when I read it the first time. Because when you start reading a comic book, unless someone tells you this is super metafictional and stuff, you're not looking for all of the metafiction.
Right.
And maybe this is in a sense subtler than, not that it really is subtler, but in some of the ways it's constructed, subtler than kind of a Watchmen construction. Watchmen lets you know early on, this is meta, just by putting articles about the heroes and stuff and other things they did in the early issues of Watchmen. Whereas this will let you think it's one kind of comic book, and then it turns out to be a different kind of comic book.
Don't you think though?
Riskier, I think, but is also very appealing and satisfying in its own way.
Don't you think, though, that the retro pages serve a similar function to the material that you just referenced that's in Watchmen?
Well, yeah, you're right there. I guess it's that they didn't signal that this is a story going on to cosmic levels early on. So when it reaches those cosmic levels on a first read, I felt kind of, hey, you just turned this story into something completely different than you sold me. So maybe you're right. Yeah, they do certainly signal the meta stuff by putting those old comic book pages at the beginning. But now I see the seeds planted more, and also on the meta level, I guess I see that we're not just commenting on sidekicks, we're commenting on the evolution of comics and on the big event series and the attempts to explain the universes and explain all the changes. I mean, they didn't originally reboot superheroes because they thought there were multiple universes. They just thought we need to refresh these heroes to sell to the new audience. But then people have slowly retroactively gone back to explain all these changes.
Well, just to touch on that a little bit more. So yeah, so the Silver Age began in the DC universe as these are new characters, familiar concepts, new characters, same names, and there wasn't a cosmic level event that caused that. It just right. was. But then we get to the 80s with Crisis, and I think the powers that be at DC thought, well, we can't just reboot Superman and Green Lantern and the Flash again. without explaining how and why. So then they came up with Crisis. And then ever since then, that's been the template for any kind of universal change in a fictional universe in comics. And they just follow that. So
up through till the 70s began, they used to have a truism in the comic book industry, the professionals in it, that the entire audience was recycled every 3 years. So that no one who was reading 4 years ago would still be reading comic books now.
Yeah.
So you could recycle your plots, and you certainly could just reboot The Flash and not worry about people who had read The Flash 10 years ago and what they would think, and you wouldn't have to explain it to them. But by the 70s, all the people working in comics had been reading the comics in the 50s and 60s. And so they knew people still cared. Yeah. And so then by the 80s, as those people were in power, like Wolfman, they said, well, how can we explain all of this? People had started trying to explain it in the 70s. You can see it, especially in Marvel Comics, all these attempts to tie continuity together.
Well, that's so funny because I've read many articles over the years with Wolfman about the whole idea of continuity and what they were trying to accomplish with Crisis. And so they come at Crisis as a means to basically wipe out continuity, but using continuity to get into that situation in the first place. So it's right. It's a bit ironic, right?
Right. So yeah, it is quite ironic, and they keep wanting to when they did the New 52 and they announced we're wiping out, we're just starting over, I just figured, well, they're just going to start over. And then I saw there was this whole Flashpoint thing to explain why they were starting over. And I just thought just seems so silly, but it's almost a tradition now in comics. You have
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So, and now currently at Marvel, it looks like Secret Wars is an attempt to explain that the Marvel universe will be slightly different and have a slightly different makeup when it's all done.
Well, to go back to your point about the recycle readers, that's not. I don't think that's happening as much.
No, it's not happening
if it did anymore.
At all.
because it's us. It's people
right.
like you and me who keep buying these comics. And I don't know how would you feel, Damian, if suddenly they did just start over and didn't explain it, and just like they did with the Flash in 1956. I mean, I guess they kind of did explain it in a way when they did that, because they did make reference to Jay Garrick Flash as being a comic book character in Barry Allen's world, but it wasn't like an event happened and suddenly there's
and then later for I think just for fun, Gardner Fox invented this idea of vibrating into other universes, and then you might as well have a Flash that was the Flash in that comic book.
But how would you feel about that?
Even then, the writers were planting Easter eggs a little bit for just their own fun, I think. But here's, even if you are young, on YouTube, I see new people like Millie Akers, for instance, for those of you watching on the YouTube here, who are fairly new comic book readers. She's only 18 years old, I believe. But you have access to the history of comics now in a way you would not have had.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can get it digitally, you can get it in trades, you can read endless articles and watch videos and podcasts of people talking about it. Whereas back in the mid 70s, when I started reading it, I think there were 2 books about the history of comics, and that was it, period. And so if you didn't find those books, you would have no idea that there was a history or a background to things. So yes, a lot of readers are like us, who've been reading 30, 40 years, or probably 50 years. And then there are the new readers who have access to the history in a way no one ever would have in the past. So did we finish up with issue 7?
Not quite. So we're talking about a universal...
We're getting lots of these cosmic scenes.
Yes, thank you.
Now here, George Perez would have drawn like 18 times more superheroes into the scenes. But other than that, they're quite cool.
Well, I noticed too on that same page that you're showing, there's 2 panels showing the heroes getting blown back by this energy wave. And never mind. I thought they were different. I thought they looked different between the 2 panels, but I guess they are not.
That would have been cool if in each panel they looked different.
Yeah, that's what I expected, based on, especially because of that one scene with the magician and those three bubbles.
Right.
So that was my misreading of it. But yeah, so the magician has flown up into space. I gotta go back. He's flown up. He's talking about our world can be restored. We can go home, all of us, and we will end this. And he goes up because he keeps saying apokatastasis over and over as he's keeping the his friends at bay who are trying to attack him, and using the power of the blood of the gods that he got before to finally fly up, and then they get this nice explosion splash page of him just screaming out apokatastasis, the magic word. And then on the next page, they talk about there are three text boxes here: apokatastasis, ekparosis, and palagenesis. So again, we get these Greek words, and let me just
Did you look
point
those
out.
up?
I did. I can't help myself. Let's see here. Which page is that? Oh no, I lost it.
Who says comics aren't for people who don't know how to do research?
That's right. Here we go. Apokatastasis, again, that in short, that means restoration. Ekparosis means conflagration, periodic destruction of the cosmos by a great conflagration. Palingenesis is rebirth, which is what follows ekparosis. So again, we get this whole concept of a destruction and a renewal from the ashes. So it's very much the phoenix concept.
Right. And if you dug deep enough, I think just like I did, they might have even mentioned those words in the article I was looking at, that all these are things that theologians argue about and define and redefine over and over again. And this is very much a theological moment where, with the blood of the gods inside of him, the magician is able to rewrite the universe back down to its original status, the way God intended it, you might say. Sorry, I'm in a religious mood today.
No, I think you're totally right to bring that stuff up. We get the white pages again, a whole page of just white panels, but forming into until the bottom panel of Earth here.
Right.
So what new universe awaits?
So
and next issue it says rebirth.
When I read that,
okay,
all came back to me. I was thinking now we'd get back to regular Earth. All the heroes would get together, beat up the American spirit, and that would be the final issue. And I was wrong. Because I thought that this issue, in sense, was the victory, and that if there's an 8th issue, it would just be sort of the aftermath of the
wrap up.
But the authors had a slightly different idea.
Okay. Well, let's just jump right into it. So here's issue number 8. This is the normal, not the variant.
Right.
Yeah. Showing those characters. Go ahead, Damian, read that that blurb.
So we were back home. The reality that had been consumed by Kronos was restored, and with it our identities. It was the apokatastasis, the rebirth of the universe. We were finally winning, but our battle was far from over. So, and we go back to a kind of Silver Age panel first page rather than a 90s first page.
Yeah, I love that. I'm glad that we're back to that. So the visual cue is that we are back to what we are familiar with so far in the series.
And I just, because I'm into the trivia of it, lo, the end is nigh, is classic Stan Lee.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It is funny how I think you and I both interpreted those retro pages up to issue 6, I think it was, as DC. No, I guess issue 5, because issue 6 is when they did the came from space thing.
Right.
So we get the first half being very focused on DC Silver Age, and now we get more Marvel as part of this. Interesting choices.
Interesting thing about this is really, again, pardon me, an interesting thing about me about how DC became exciting in the early 80s is the migration of a bunch of sort of experienced Marvel writers came over to DC. They didn't just repeat Marvel over at DC, but they did change DC, and Marv Wolfman was kind of one of the leaders of that. They might have even, asked him to come over and make DC more like Marvel. I'm not sure, but he seemed to be the most successful writer at the time of taking some of the vibe from Marvel and reinterpreting it. He took DC very seriously, as you can see with Infinite Crisis on Infinite Earths, but giving it just that both the bigger kind of emotional thing and the flawed heroes thing more, and all of that kind of stuff. So I just think of that when suddenly we had all these heroes that just seemed to exist in a Silver Age DC world, and suddenly maybe it was the incursion of the Marvel world into the DC world. That's really stretching, but anyway, that's just a thought that occurred to me that I'm throwing out there.
I think it's a great thought. So yeah, they show the Red Vengeance, or a version of the Red Vengeance here.
Right.
No, there's still hope. Look, I love how he points off the panel, off the page,
right,
imploring you to turn the page.
Yes. We're wondering what the ultimate evil on the next page is that they are seeing.
Yes. And then the bonus thing at the bottom is, oh, look, Jack Fearless and Ladybug, they had a thing, apparently, which is interesting.
The secret of these sworn enemies. Almost looks like an Archie Comics picture. But
yeah, it does. You're right. It does. It does. It has an Archie vibe to it with
their turned up noses and. Anyway, yeah, and so who is in the background? There's some weird-looking hero behind the Red Vengeance. Do we know who he is? We know that she's the magician hero, but
right. I don't recall seeing this character before, but he might have appeared in a background or something. He's definitely has distinctive hair
in the background.
Oh yeah, tons of Kirby Crackle. I think we same thing with the issue where the gods are. There's Kirby Crackle everywhere there. So
right.
Yeah, very Marvel-esque. So yeah, we get going into the issue. We get Kronos, the Titan, on Earth. Look how big he is. There's a little ship. Well, it's not little. There's a ship on the sea, and look how small it is compared to him. And notice there's on the previous, right there.
Mm-hmm.
Right there. There's a panel showing him entering the world. I just like the construction of that, where it's just this crackle of kind of circular energy up in the sky, and Kronos's arm and a little bit of his head is coming through that portal. So I really like the way that they did that.
So here I was a bit confused. We got these caption boxes in different colors, like when we were with the Greek gods. Are those the voices of the Greek gods again?
Yes.
Okay. So I wasn't. Does that mean the Greek gods are reborn too? Because we never physically see them, I don't think.
No, we don't. That is coming up.
Oh, is it explained later?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, one more thing about that panel showing the splash page showing Kronos entering our world. Mm-hmm. If you look at the bottom, you get some splashes of color here, kind of like the water is splashing onto the border, the page.
Right.
So it's bleeding into the real world in a way, I guess. It's just a nice little touch again.
Right, and he is coming from outside this world at the top of the panel.
Right. Yeah, just I don't know who thought of that, but it's wonderfully done. Yeah, I mentioned before Fahrenheit asking, wondering where her brother is. So there's Fahrenheit there going after Kronos. You son of a bitch, where's my brother? Well, I don't know what happened to that character. I don't think we ever see him again after what happened in the previous issue. Ladybug is I'm gonna speed through some of this, Damian. So jump in if you need to. Fahrenheit apparently gets blasted away out of existence. here. So she's joined her brother in non-existence. Ladybug is taking control of President Williams' ship and fires all these missiles. That doesn't do anything. And then here we get back to the Stone, which I have notes on here too. I think I actually had that on the previous.
Oh, and this brings us back to I had thought Ladybug was dead, and obviously she's alive now.
Yeah. Jack Fearless finds the Stone in that globe that we talked about earlier. So he says, should have known. You never change, do you, Joe? And then he crushes that globe and pulls out the Stone. So the Stone, I'm gonna have to go over my memory here because I can't find my notes. The Stone actually is something from Greek mythology. It is what Zeus's mother wrapped up in swaddling clothes and gave to Kronos before Kronos swallowed Zeus whole. That's what saved Zeus, is his mother doing that. Stone. Yeah. So the stone has power within the Greek mythology because of that association. And I need to find my notes here about that. But anyway,
so the president always had the Stone inside of his helicarrier, basically.
Yes. Yep, I'm not finding it, so I'm gonna move on. What's the good notes if I can't actually use them? In the meantime, Magician has gone back to Kid Vigilante's abandoned mansion, and remember how we talked about, Damian, last time, where I wondered if when Kid Vigilante pulled that USB stick or whatever it was out of that console, and then the lights went out, and there was the heartbeat, and I thought maybe that he killed Kid Victory.
Right.
Well, I'm not so sure of that now because we have a panel showing Magician going into there, and there's Kid Victory in the stasis tube, and there it appears to be powered.
Right. The body has not rotted or anything.
Yeah, exactly. So apparently he's still alive.
Retroactively, I'm thinking the idea might have been that they erased his brain rather than stopped his heart.
Ooh. So instead of a heartbeat, that was
they had to pull the information out. They had to drain in his brain.
You're right. That makes a lot more sense.
He had the kind of brain that the Red Vengeance had planned on all along, and Kid Vigilante didn't.
Oh, you know what? Speaking of that, I forgot to bring this up when we were talking about it before. So they talked about how Kid Victory basically was basically dead. He's on life support. But Kid Vigilante was telling Ladybug this in an earlier issue about how it wasn't some superpower being or some fight with a supervillain or anything. It was basically a brain tumor. Right. So did Red Vengeance in his machinations, his cloning, is that what caused that brain tumor? Did Red Vengeance actually kill?
The side effect might have been a tumor.
Yeah. So he inadvertently possibly ruined his own plan. Then we get a scene with Yoshimi again. She has the Gigantobots, and what again? I've talked about how much I love this character and her attitude and her bravado. She says, "Attention, President Williams. You are a war criminal and a madman. You subjugated my people. You enslaved them. You took away their honor and you turned them into your toys. In the name of my father and of my grandfather, and in the name of my friends who you have tortured and killed, I sentence you to death." And then she unleashes the full force of the Gigantobots against Kronos in this wonderful page here. Lots of explosions, lots of explodey bits.
And I'd almost forgotten she's in control of all those robots with remote controls, bitches.
Yeah, that's right.
So you have to keep following all the details. They're not going to remind you of them. But yeah, so that is a wonderfully drawn or colored scene again.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of good fireworks in these last two issues.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Magician puts that USB stick back into the console, and it's uploading. So I think what you were saying is absolutely correct. Only now, what's different? We'll find that out. So the attack on Kronos does not work, and we get a bit of cursing from Yoshimi. And look at her face, Damian. She looks so defeated in that panel.
Not crying blood like everyone else always.
Yeah, thankfully, but
yeah, no, she's very. She thought this would change everything, and it has no effect.
No effect whatsoever. Yeah, and she's just so defeated here. It's again, I keep saying this, but it's heartbreaking to watch this. So again, kudos to the artists for showing this wonderful emotion, and then it doesn't stop. On the next page, you get Ladybug here realizing that Jack is about to die or is dying, and she's crying. Distraught over the situation. Magician starts, and this is important here. He starts his mantra of saying apokatastasis. He does it on this page twice.
Right.
And then on the third time is when something happens. He busts open the stasis tube because he's trying to get Kid Victory to wake up.
Right.
But in the dialogue, the way he's actually talking to Kid Vigilante or talking about Kid Vigilante. So I think at this point, did you figure out what was going to happen, at least with Kid Vigilante and Kid Victory here?
I thought that they would put the mind of Kid Vigilante into Kid Victory. There's a whole bunch of stuff about the gods saying, our power, you're stealing our power, you can't do this, can't, please.
Yeah,
so they're using the power of the gods in some way.
So yeah, earlier on in the issue, they feel betrayed by Kid Vigilante. So again, you have almost in a similar fashion, you make a deal with the devil, and then you don't get what you bargained for, and then
Kid Vigilante's the devil.
In this case, yes, yeah. So I'm not sure exactly what the gods thought they were getting into, but they feel trapped. And they're talking about this in the scenes in which the magician is with Kid Victory. So that will come into play in a second. Let's see here. Kronos has now fully transformed himself into what we saw earlier.
Right.
With Kid Vigilante and Red Vengeance.
We saw Kronos that way. Yeah.
So another great splash page there of Kronos. I thought that was really cool.
Right. So Kronos is ever more unstoppable.
And then we get a flashback here with Kid Vigilante and Apollo and the gods. Now we actually see them fully and in their colors, which is a nice panel. And this is when Kid Vigilante convinces Apollo to join him in this fight, to rise up and face this nightmare as a hero. And he does. Apollo does agree. Even though his brothers and sisters are going, no, we don't want to do this. We don't want to lose our power. We don't want to do this stuff.
Right.
But he convinces them.
Is their power being used to revive Kid Vigilante? Or is it being used to go into that Follow Stone or something?
I will say no to that last question. But I was confused about that. When we get to that point, I want to talk about that too.
So, in other words, is their power needed to defeat Kronos, or is their power just needed to bring Kid Vigilante back to life?
I would say both. I think it's both in this case.
You can see that I was kind of confused.
Well, I was too because when I was rereading this issue, I had to read this scene 2 or 3 times before I felt I fully comprehended exactly what was intended, or at least my understanding of the events of these last few pages. The transfer is complete, and Apollo is saying we have no choice. We must join him. And that's when Kid Victory's eyes open, He's glowing with that golden power, and he is transformed. And he goes off. Notice, Damian, in the bottom panels here with the magician, there's that colorful halo or effect, or I'm not sure exactly what that is. And then he's looking at his hands and just staring at his hands for a moment.
That's kind of cool, but I don't know why.
Yes, and I want to touch on that when we get to the alternate issue, because I took it a certain way. However, what I took from this issue, from this presentation, was that his power was gone, his magic was gone. I thought maybe somehow his magic got taken by what the event that just occurred. And so he's just looking at his hands going,
right,
it's gone. I don't have power anymore.
Right.
In the meantime, Jack has taken control of Skybase 1. He's transported Ladybug and the remaining survivors off the ship. And he's building up ramming speed, or at least, some equivalent of that.
And so in this panel at the bottom, is that Kid Eternity or Kid
Victory?
Kid Victory / Kid Vigilante shooting up into the sky out of the mansion?
Yes. That's how I took it.
That I didn't connect up very well.
Well, and it's hard. It's hard because you have, and the panel above it, you have the ship in a very similar fashion, streaming towards Kronos, and then you get that panel there with Kid Victory coming out of the mansion. I mean, it's clearly the mansion that it's coming out of, but it's very similar in construction. So it can be confusing.
I would argue, given that they kind of stretched this part of the story out, that they did a poor job of giving you enough focused clues as to what, where, and how, or what, where, and why. Well, the whys, what, where, and how we're seeing. At times, it takes a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. But again, that's one of the things I loved about this book, is that we weren't fed this stuff.
But I think you could do a little more without completely leading us by the hand to make these last sequences work a little better.
You're right. I would be really interested to know, if someone is reading this for the first time, how they interpreted these things that we are talking about, where we were confused. Were we confused because of the baggage that we bring? The history of our own experiences reading these kinds of stories, because we're expecting one thing and we get another, or is it just unclear because of the construction of what's on the page? It's the artist not doing a clear enough job. What is it? How are people interpreting these things in comparison to how we are doing it? I really love to hear that.
And also, given at least my first reading, was spread out over 3 years.
That's true. Yeah, exactly. So we have that in play as well, because we have that long break between the first half and essentially the last quarter, third, whatever, of the series, and how that plays with our memories of what happened, and going into this, like you said, for the reading it for the first time. There's a lot to play with here in terms of how we interpret the events of this series.
So my interpretation, which I'm only now doubting, was that whatever Kid Magician, or whatever the Magician and Kid Vigilante did, transferred into this stone. But now I'm not sure if I'm right at all about that.
And I agree. I took it that way too at first, but then on the reread, it doesn't appear that they are connected at all, other than this is the power of the gods in play. So the Omphalos stone has a lot of power. That's the stone that Zeus was holding in issue 5, I think it was, fighting off Kronos in that scene, in that retro page scene. So it has a lot of power to affect even Kronos. And then you have, as you see in that bottom page where you were just showing, you have all this, the colors of the gods.
Those streaking lights, which are the gods, but I didn't realize that till just now. I didn't know what I was seeing before.
Yeah.
So I thought we were just seeing the helicarrier with this Omphalos stone going at ramming speed towards Kronos.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm thinking we're seeing both the helicarrier and all these lights that are the gods, plus Kid Victory, shooting towards Kronos. And here we see it more explicitly what they look like.
Right.
So I should have put it together better, but I was so stuck in my thinking that the Omphalos stone had the god's powers and was what was going to destroy Kronos.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, I guess the Omphalos powered helicarrier rams Kronos, but then he's still alive. Although he's saying, no, we are too strong for this, no. And then streaking in come the vestigial gods, or whatever's left of the Greek gods. And then they kind of ram into him also.
And that is the killing blow.
And that's the killing blow, I guess. But it's not like, even the way it's drawn, we don't see them shooting straight into him. We just kind of see an explosion of color and lightning.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know when they struck him. Did they strike him in this panel?
Yes. So they come, it looks to me like they come from behind him and go through his chest.
Right.
And out through the front.
So for all the brilliance of the artwork throughout, I think this is mismanaged. And I think we need a dead-on shot where you see that they shoot right through his chest and you see it in a very visceral way so that you're just absolutely sure what happened, because there's just not enough other clues and there's no explanation.
Yeah, I think you're right there. And then I guess because he's been pierced by these gods, then he explodes. His power is unleashed. Right. It's no longer contained within the form.
Right.
And then you have Kid Vigilante, Kid Victory, whatever you want to call him. It's Kid Vigilante in his clone brother's body.
So we assume.
Yeah, I certainly do.
We're never told that is Kid Vigilante, are we?
Well, true. But if you look at the panel, his colors are opposite of what Kid Vigilante has been shown.
Oh, really? So his costume is Kid
Victory's, yeah.
But how do we know that that's Kid Victory's brain, not Kid Victory's brain in there?
Well, it's true. You have a point. Maybe
literally Kid Victory's brain, right? I mean,
that's true. Yeah, I did take it that Kid Vigilante's mind was uploaded into Kid Victory's body, and the power of the gods was able to restore him and defeat Kronos here. And then on the next page, you have so the power is unleashed, and then you have these panels showing the characters who are bruised and bloodied, maybe dying, and they're being reborn, restored. So we get back to the apocatastasis again.
A brief sense of this color washing across the earth, and it goes from the dark. This also confused me because normally you read from right to left, but the dark side is on the left, so the renewed side is on the right of the page. So you normally, left to right. So yes. The new side is on the left side of the page, and the dark side, which I assume is the old side, is on the right.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I feel like another panel or two there could have made that scene a little better.
And then we get the ending of the series here. Last 3 pages, they talk about restoration, and the heroes are back. The adult heroes are back.
And I'm not instantly so excited about that because I didn't feel like the adult heroes treated the teen heroes that well. Well, this is now the good version of them, not distorted by the will of the American.
Well, I don't know about that. When we get to this next panel I want to talk about. But to be fair, the only real interaction we've seen with an older hero and a teen sidekick has been with Red Vengeance and Kid Vigilante, and that's not exactly a wholesome relationship.
I guess I form my own sort of feeling about the book being about abused children. But.
Yeah. So here's the scene. So we clearly see here in this panel Kid Victory's suit, the red with the blue accents instead of the blue with the red accents, which is Vigilante's costume. The adult heroes fly down. It's a really cute scene where some of the teen sidekicks are running towards their mentors, their parents, whatever.
Right.
There's some hugging going on in the background, and then there's this panel here of Andrew, or Vigilante Victory, whatever,
Right.
looking at his father. He's got blood coming out of his eye. He just says, "Father," and Red Vengeance comes up to him and says, "Acceptable," and walks off. And then look at the Kid Vigilante's face. Now he's crying blood out of both eyes.
I know. I don't know what that's supposed to be.
Oh, it's just. Again, I say Red Vengeance is such a dick.
Red Vengeance, I assume, thinks it's Kid Victory, or does he know it's Kid Vigilante inside there? I guess he knows because it was all his plan in the first place.
Yeah. So I guess good job, son. You didn't screw it up too badly.
Acceptable.
What a dick. Anyway, so then finally we get the final page of the series. The magician returns home.
So he has not lost his power, or his power has been restored to him.
Yeah. So I think I just took that. I interpreted that incorrectly when I first read it. And when we talk about the differences here in a minute between the two number 8 issues, I'll tell you what I was thinking. But yeah, so he obviously has his power. He's returned home. He says, we can finally take off our masks, but we can never be children again. So here's this great ending to this journey that these kids have been on, being put in a situation where they had to grow up to some degree, and in a sense take over the roles and responsibilities that their mentors and parents had. And you get the added benefit of, from a storytelling standpoint, this series opened up, not counting the retro page, but the series opened up with the magician leaving home.
Oh, good.
And now he returns home.
And there's the same pictures on the wall that he walked past in issue 1.
Yeah. So a great circular ending to the story. I loved that.
But you come home, but you're not the same person. And we've all experienced that, right? I think we've all experienced coming home and everything seems the same, but you're not the same anymore.
Right. What was that? The Tom Wolfe that said you can never go home again, or something like that. Right. Yeah.
And also we have he's taking off his mask. He's hidden his identity from his parents.
Mm-hmm. His mother especially. Yeah.
To be discussing his identity with his parents now.
Yeah. And so to go back to something that happened in a previous issue in the first volume, when he leaves that voicemail, did his mom actually get it?
Right. And does she listen to it? Because he says she never actually listens to her voicemails.
Right. Anyway. So, what did you think of this ending to Danger Club? The normal version, or the non-variant version?
I thought it was a mostly good version. I do feel frustrated where there's a climax and there's a little unclarity to me. Like, that's a point in a comic book or any kind of story. At the climax, I want to be clear what happened, and so it taints an overall brilliant book to me a little bit, that the ending has these points where I have to struggle to decide what happened.
Okay.
It's one thing to sort of put together clues, but somehow I feel like the big denouement, or whatever the proper term is, should be crystal clear to me. And I think they missed a number of opportunities visual to do that.
I would agree with that.
Maybe I'm too much of a barbarian. I would have crashed the helicarrier right into Kronos' mouth. And I would have shown the light of the gods bursting out of Kronos' chest, rather than these more subtle images they gave.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I will disagree. I like how some of the ending was not as crystal clear, just because that conforms to what we have been shown so far in the series, where like you said before, our hands are not always being held in this series. So I like that. I like that quality.
I definitely like a lot that Red Vengeance just says acceptable. I'm not sure what to make about the bleeding out of the eyes at the end.
Yeah, that was weird to me too.
Yeah. It just maybe again reinforce my sense that there's an undercurrent of a sense of child abuse about the relationships.
Okay, now we definitely have to somehow get together with Walker and Jones and Drake and find out if that was any part of what they were thinking.
Right. Yeah, and I definitely like that ending with the magician and all of that. And I do, with this repeated reading, I appreciate that they had to go cosmic at the end because of what they were aiming to, do on the metafictional level and everything.
Mm-hmm. Okay, shall we? Let's talk about the variant ending, the alternate ending. If you don't mind, I don't want to go through all of it again, but just talk about just the differences.
Pardon me just a second. I'll text you later. I guess you'll have to edit that out. Sorry.
It's all right.
Life goes on elsewhere.
That's right.
My wife is passing me notes. Sorry. So you were talking about the alternate yes. book. I lost my place.
Let's just talk about the differences between the two books instead of going over it as in any kind of whole fashion.
Cover.
Right. So you want to talk about the cover?
Well, at first glance, you look at the cover and you think, oh, it's just colored in a different shade. But then you look closer and there's all these dots, which are like what they used to call Ben-Day dots that
yes.
artists used to have to glue onto the surface of paper to get shades of gray.
Thank you for bringing that up. I had that in my notes too.
And the background is different. It's instead of a storm, it's kind of this gray cloud. And even the for some reason, there's a bit of a difference in the cloud down at the bottom corner. I'm not sure why I noticed that or whether it matters, but
you know what Damian,
it blots out the signature of the colorist.
You're right, it does. Hey, on your copy, I just noticed this. You're right. The cloud is different to me too, but on mine it says Todd Rules.
Oh, you're right.
Is that what it says on yours? Okay, so it's not just somebody who had written on my copy before I bought it. So is that Todd McFarlane? Are they making some sort of reference there?
I don't know. I don't see why they would, but I thought maybe it was a different colorist, but since the name of the colorist has disappeared, but they don't mention in the credits a different colorist. Todd Rules, huh? And the whole effect, like if you look, like I'm looking at her face, Yoshimi's face at the bottom versus this Yoshimi's face, it just looks so different with the difference in coloring.
Yeah, definitely darker.
It has almost I don't know, almost a different emotional quality without the shading of the coloring.
And notice too, the cover has wrinkles on it.
And scratches.
Scratches and tears. You pointed that out. So we talk about the meta qualities of this book. That's very meta right there. But yeah, I'm glad you pointed out the Ben-Day dots, the coloring. It's definitely flatter, less vibrant than what we got in the normal issue. So that does play through the rest of this book, the rest of this variant book.
Oh, interesting. See, so I've just read this once and not the whole book. I've just sort of searched for when I thought the pages became different and just read the last four or five pages, or three or four pages.
All right.
So you have a better view on this because you more thoroughly went through and read this version, which I'll be doing later this afternoon.
So as I said earlier, besides the cover, really the only differences start on page 16. And that is the page where the gods are shown that I pointed out earlier.
That's a pretty important page, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's not the page.
Oh.
That is definitely one of the pages, but that's not the page.
It's not the first page of a difference.
Oh, wait. See, Damian, I wish comics would bring back page numbers on the pages.
That would be nice. I love it when you see credits that so-and-so inked page 18 through 19, and then you don't know which page that is.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm sorry. This is
cared. You'd have to spend a lot of time counting the pages.
This is the page. I was right the first time. This is the page. So the differences here in I'm going to call this 8A for the original, the normal version, and 8B is the variant. So in 8A, Kid Vigilante says, we don't have time for this when he's talking to Apollo. And in 8B, in the variant, he says, you know that's not true. So Apollo had just said, this is a trick, another trick to hurt me.
Right.
And so it goes from we don't have time for this to you know that's not true. So already we're seeing a excuse me, we're seeing a softer presentation to Kid Vigilante than what was before. In the next panel, the difference is Apollo says you're not giving me a choice to what Kid Vigilante says.
Right.
In 8B, he doesn't say anything.
Right.
There are no words.
He does indeed know what the truth is, and
it dawns on him much quicker in this second version. In panel 3, in 8A here, hold on. I only jotted down little bits on the page, but on my paper. But I want to make sure I get the full dialogue here.
In the original version, he's talking about the choice some more.
Yeah, you have a choice, the same choice your father had, the same choice any of us have. You can die as Kronos erases all reality, or you can die fighting the creature that destroyed your home. In 8B, he says, your power, the power of the Olympians. I've done everything I can to get us to this point, but I can't see past this moment. That is an incredible shift in the momentum of this book, the plot of this book.
Right. We assume in the original that he still is following his knowledge of the future.
And everything hinges on his plan, his actions. Suddenly that shifts to Apollo.
Right.
And so join me, Vigilante says, and you will face this nightmare a hero. That's the original. And in the variant, join me and we will face this nightmare together. In the next panel, Apollo's, you're asking me, my brothers and sisters, you are asking us to die forever. That's the original. And then it goes to, you are asking us to die. So those are the differences on that page.
I'm not sure why they took the forever out, but maybe just to make it seem less extreme.
Well, and don't you think perhaps that if that forever had not been in there, that it would perhaps be less confusing when they show up in their energy forms later? Perhaps,
yeah.
I mean, that's a very subtle thing. It's one word in a dialogue box, but again, just that shift in tone with Vigilante towards Apollo, right, and him saying we have to do this together. I can't do everything. I don't know everything. I thought that was incredible. On the next page, page 17. Let's see here. Sorry, I got my two books here.
Did they signal this? Because in my cursory view of hearing about the different issues online, I just heard there's some different final pages.
That's pretty much all that they talked about. I want to get into that once we get through this. There are some specific things that Walker and Jones talk about regarding that, though. Let's see here. So, this is Apollo addressing his brothers and sisters. He says in the first one, we have no choice. We must join him. And then the second one, it says, brother, I will join you. This is one of the gods talking to Apollo. So a difference there. On the next page, 18, this is where Victory and Vigilante come alive. again, these are the gods talking. We must all join him, and instead, in the second one, it says, "We will all join you." So instead of this being this is something that we have to do, it becomes this is something that we choose to do.
Right.
And okay, so here, Damian, this is where I mentioned earlier, where a magician is looking at his hands. So if you compare the two, that energy signature at the bottom.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of washing over him. So he sees it. Right. So this is how I took it. In the first issue, we don't see it, but he does. In the second issue, we get to see what he's seeing. So it makes a lot more sense here. So that restorative energy.
On the original, it looked like the power was gone because you don't see anything.
But here is the restorative energy. And in the panel where you see that, there are those dots again.
Oh, you're right. Ben-Day dots around his mask.
Yes. So that effect is already starting right here. So what we saw on the cover is now we see it for the first time within the story.
These changes emphasize again the importance of the colorist in this project.
Exactly.
You have to do the colors a certain way. It's not like just anybody could just come in and color things.
And now I'm going to jump ahead to page 24. This is after Kronos is defeated, and we talked about how the characters are getting restored. Their injuries are being healed. And not only are they healed, but if you look at the differences, well, see if I can do this one-handed. So in the original, you could see Yoshimi here in the panel where it's very clear, the blood's disappeared, she's healed. But in the second version, it's the same thing, but notice the shift in the art style.
They're in the flat colors, they've got the Ben-Day.
Exactly.
And the magician has a hat and a bow tie.
Right, so he's physically transformed here beyond any kind of healing. And notice, so in the original, he says a pocket of stasis, and the dialogue box is up above him. It's clear he's talking. And the second one that we see, well, I'm bumping my microphone too much here. He's whispering it. Yeah.
And they move the position of it, I assume mostly so you'd be sure to see the hat.
Yeah, not as to, yeah, exactly, not to cover up the hat. Then
the Bright New World is a new world of flat colors and basically the flat colors of an older comic.
Yep, exactly.
A little bit underplayed because they're kind of pastel, but in any case, more like an old comic. And the sky, the clouds in the sky are very simply drawn.
With those dark outlines, yeah.
Right.
And in my notes, I say the restoration is more Silver Agey.
Right.
And then, okay, so here's a major difference. On page 25, that next page, Damian, all the text is different. Everything here is different.
I noticed that.
So in the original, there are just two text boxes. It says, "And from that flame, rebirth." But in the variant, it says, "From that flame, the life force of creation itself. Every soul Kronos had consumed, every world that had perished to feed his insatiable hunger. Everything that had been taken from us, everything we had been, all of it released. The multiverse itself reborn before us. It had all come back." Boy, talk about hitting us over the head.
So that's different. There we get the return of the multiverse, the undoing of Crisis, which we do not get in the original version or the A version, where it's still just one world that's restored. Now it's all worlds are restored. And then the next page is, even an idiot like me can see that we're looking at a different comic book. It's both drawn and colored differently, and it's very mock Silver Age in the B version. Yeah.
And notice too, I like the construction of this. One, you have different characters being shown, and you have in the variant, you have Insectra, a villain, being shown coming back. Who, we only saw her in one panel in like issue 2 or 3.
Good memory that
in
you
the retro page.
Uh-huh.
And notice how the characters here, I'll show this, the original. Notice how we are, from our perspective, reading this. We're looking up at them. We have the way that they're
Right.
positioned makes us look up towards them.
Right.
In the variant version, it's less so, and more.
Right.
We're more on a equal level
It's
with
like
them.
we're flying with them among the clouds.
A little bit. So definitely a tonal shift there in the presentation. Not just obviously the way it's colored and everything, but the way that people are positioned.
I wonder if you did an analysis of modern comics versus Silver Age comics, if you'd find in general that the Silver Age comics made you feel more like an equal, and the modern comics have more of an awareness of the godlike superiority of superheroes over regular people.
I think there's some credence to that thought, Damian. Yeah. One other change on that splash page in the original, that first text box says, after months of darkness and pain and suffering, and then the rest of it's the same, but in the variant, it's the first box is different a little bit. It says after months of death and months of death and pain and suffering instead of darkness and pain and suffering. So one word difference.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that difference.
That's kind of an odd. But death is.
I want to emphasize that everything's brought back rather than just things from one world.
Yeah, and death is, I think, a more concrete concept to us than just darkness. So perhaps they wanted to go with that.
And then we have a lot change in the next page, including the coloring and many of the panels redrawn.
Yes. So a lot of the text has changed after so much darkness instead of death. In the second one, the light was returning to our world, whereas where that text box is, there's no text box in the original. Instead of saying father, he says dad, and notice his eye. He's not bleeding. It's actually a tear.
Right.
And then, of course, you get Red Vengeance and drawn very Silver Agey.
Mm-hmm.
Good job, son.
Good job, son, instead of acceptable.
And shaking his hand. And that's when the restorative energy transforms Kid Vigilante into his Silver Age self.
Uh-huh.
And he's smiling.
And he says, holy Robin.
That's right. Oh my God, Damian, I didn't even notice that.
And you are Robin, practically.
I know. Jeez.
Seen the picture.
That is awesome.
Some of you may have seen a picture that Eric tweeted out of himself as Robin at a con.
Yeah. We can just skip over that.
Okay, sorry. We could finally be heroes again. So instead of ending with him bleeding from the eyes, he's smiling and saying we can finally be heroes again.
Right. And then instead of the ending that we talked about in the original, in this one, there is no, this is the one thing I don't like about it in terms of the story itself. We don't get the cyclical closing of the magician, but instead we get a panel that says we could live, and then we get the planet Earth, and we pan out and we see all of the multiverse Earths out there. So it is restored. Finally, everyone would live. Everyone, including everyone in the multiverse.
And in the final panel of the original version, we see Earth by itself floating in space.
Yes, exactly. Sorry, I'm glad you pointed that out.
Earth versus the ever spiraling outward and outward endless versions of Earth.
Yes.
And so the first ending is an ending that seems artistically satisfying to me as an adult. And this is the ending I really want.
Okay, let's talk about that. Why?
My inner love of comics, I want everything to be never ending, and pish posh to this life circles back on itself, and we're older now and we can never go back to being children. I want to go back to being children. I want that joy over and over and over. Endless iterations.
Oh my gosh. You are absolutely correct. I agree with what you just said. 100%. I was going to say the same thing, so I'm not even going to repeat that. So
sorry for stealing.
No, that's awesome. I'm glad we're on the same page about the ending, about the two endings. So Okay, let's. We have been talking for quite a while. Thank you for the people that have been viewing thus far and over the course of the time that we've been talking. But Damian, okay, let's talk about this in general terms. And we've touched on some of these things already, but I have a couple questions for you. One is, what about this book kept us around for the 3 years that it took for it to come out, to finally end?
Well, I just didn't know. I wasn't sure what was going to happen next, and I wanted to know. It's not like some stories you read and, yeah, okay, you can just put it down in the middle because you pretty much know how it's going to go anyway. They surprised me with each issue, particularly like the first 5 issues, so that I felt, my God, what can they be doing? What can they be up to? What can happen next? Starting with the first issue where we get this rapid descent into brutality, and then the second issue where we see our hero killed in the first page, basically. They just did a really good job of keeping me going that way. Mm-hmm. I think the experience would be totally different read, for the first time as a trade or something. But that's what kept me awaiting new issues. I couldn't figure out what they were up to and what they were going to do next. Mm-hmm. How about you? Does that line up with you, or was there some other thing that drew you onwards and kept you a true believer over 3 years?
Well, that, and of course, as we've talked about in the previous discussion, it is anything that is a story about teen sidekicks. Mm-hmm. You pretty much got me right there. So to go into this just predisposed to wanting to read the story, and then reading those first 4 issues that came out and finding out how much love they were putting into, or at least the way I was interpreting it, there had to be love in this comic because of the way that they were giving it to us. The retro pages, the examination of the teen heroes instead of the adult heroes in this situation. The brutality even of it is just so different from mainstream big 2 superhero tales. They were pushing some boundaries. There was some metafictional elements to it even early on that I absolutely fell in love with. So that's what kept me going. So this question is a callback to Travis Gottman, the Gottman on YouTube, when I asked for questions about this for the first discussion that we had a few weeks ago. At the time of this recording, he asked, what kept us coming back to something that took so long to get out, and there you go.
Yeah, I would say there's secondarily there's kind of now that we've talked about it so much, and we talked about the background of the team who created it, there was a real synchronicity in what they were all doing together. And even though I couldn't have put that into words before doing this big, long podcast and rereading it and everything, I think I sensed that from the beginning, which again compelled me to want to see what they were going to do next, because they were doing things at what felt like they were deeper in the groove or whatever than your average comic book, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Making all their little elements work, which I personally felt fell apart a little bit in that last issue, where I lost track of things a little too much for my taste. But other than that, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to try and be apologetic for the artist, because even though I agree with you, there are some parts of it that could have been a little more clear in construction. Mm-hmm. I still think the job that they did in those pages is just phenomenal, and quite frankly, a lot better than a lot of the superhero stuff that I read from DC and Marvel.
True. Maybe I was just spoiled by the other 7 issues. And
well, it can't be perfect, right?
Now that we've gone over so thoroughly the alternate issue, that gives it a new level, gives the ending a new level of metafictional excitement to me that kind of made up for all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
And I kind of feel a shame hearing that alternate stuff is not in the trade.
Yeah.
I think they should supply a digital code with the trade, giving people that last version digitally or something.
I agree. I'm not sure why Image decided this, and this is very clearly Image Comics' decision. This is, again, going back to my conversation with Landry at Emerald City last year. He talked about that, and he referred to it in other interviews as well. But he told me too that be sure to get the alternate, the variant copy, because it's not going to be in the trade. And he told me it was Image Comics' decision not to do that for some reason. Now, to be fair, Landry, Jones, and maybe Drake, I'm not sure who makes these kinds of decisions for this book, but they did briefly flirt with the idea of printing only one version. That's not the right way to put this.
Only one cover.
Having one cover, one number 8 issue, but some of the printed issues would have the alternate ending and some would not. Some would have, so you could potentially get one ending or the other.
Right.
And then it was Image Comics who said, no, let's not do that. Let's put out a variant version.
I can see why they would like that idea artistically, but it would drive fans insane.
Yeah, and they knew that too. They knew it wouldn't be fair, and it would probably enrage a few people.
But artistically, it might be kind of pleasing when you're playing metafictionally with things to say there's just two different endings out there, and who knows which ending you'll get, just as who knows what ending you'll get in our metafictional world. Exactly.
So, but yeah, I agree with you. Image should have offered a digital download code for that alternate ending. I can
see why it would be confusing to print these side by side, because of the changes start in the middle of the issue and are so subtle at first. But I think a free digital download would kind of solve that. It would give you access to a different version.
Now, last time I checked, and this is now October 3rd, 2015, in case people from the future are listening to this, at this point, Comixology was offering both versions of number 8 as a bundle, so you could get both versions at a discounted price.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Well,
so you have to search for that, I think.
Good. When I first looked, you had to buy them separately, and I just, since I prefer to own a physical copy, I didn't want to pay full price for what I thought was just 3 extra pages.
Yeah. Like I said, I could be wrong about that, but the last time I checked, it was that way.
Yeah. Now, people talk about rarity in comics. This is going to be a real rarity then. It's never going to be reprinted. And who knows how many copies of the alternate version were printed. But since it's not Harley Quinn or whatever, it probably won't ever go up in price that much anyway.
Well, see, that exactly right.
I ordered it from mycomicshop.com, I believe. Or maybe I did it from who did I do it from? Yeah, mycomicshop.com, and I think they pretty much charged me cover price.
Well, this comic is such a joy. It was such a joy to me. It was even more so having to reread it because I was going to talk with you about it. On top of that, I'm talking about it with you, someone who also read it and is a fan. And it's just I just think it's one of the better superhero stories that I've read in the last, I don't know, few decades.
Right.
Well constructed.
If I were to edit a comic book, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You continue your thoughts. Sorry, I was jumping all over.
It's just well constructed, beautifully rendered by Jones and Drake. Like I said, I'm repeating myself, but the metafictional qualities, the focus on the teen superheroes, it's just a wonderful, in some ways, very high concept. In other ways, not so much. But it's still a wonderful book, a superhero book. It's a great book. People should read this. This is a book that people should look back on in 10 years and go, yeah, that was a good book. Like people do with oh gosh, name something, Damian. you look back on Crisis or the
Kingdom Come.
Kingdom Come or Daredevil, Dark Knight, all of those things. I think this is up there with those.
Well, so when you do a book on that level with the big characters, you're going to get much more of a buzz than when you make up all your own characters. Mm-hmm. Although I kind of liked it better. I enjoyed them having their whole universe that they made up. So if I were an editor, I would say, I want this team, and what do they have next up their sleeve, and how can we help them to get it out in a timely manner and get it a lot of promotion, because there's definitely something special going on here, and we need to market that. Yeah.
Image would be crazy not to go forward with a revisitation or a restoration, an apocatastasis, if you will, of this world. But even if they never go back to this world, this team of Walker, Jones, and Drake is just wonderful. And I will pretty much buy, if not just commit to buying anything that they do from now on.
Have you tracked down any more of their work? We were talking about, have we both read the Supergirl in junior high school book they did?
Yeah, the Supergirl and the Cosmic Adventures in the 8th grade, I think is the subtitle. Yeah, I did read that. I did ask the question, I wanted to make sure I clear this up, if Rusty Drake did the colors, and he did not on that. It was just Walker and Jones working on that. They also worked together on, I mentioned this before, but on some Batman Brave and the Bold issues, which I plan to get. And I know, having read some recent interviews with Walker, I think Jones too, they're working on some stuff. They're together. They got some things. In fact, today I was looking on Twitter, and Walker is at some convention. It's a convention I'm not familiar with, so I don't remember the name of it now. But he was on a panel, and he made some comment about something that he's working on that he could not yet announce. So I don't know if that's working with Jones and Drake, but either way, I'll be paying attention to it.
Well, he was after Charles Soule left Red Lanterns. I left Red Lanterns, but I think that Landry Walker was the writer who followed him. So I feel like maybe I should dig up those back issues now.
Yes, that's very true, and he did, and I bought them from him at that Emerald City show, and so I need to go back and read those as well.
I kind of wonder if that might have been one of those situations where often your hands are tied. They know they're canceling the book already when they put you on it, and they just want you to be part of some crossover or something.
Yeah,
but I'll still take a look at it now. Yeah. I remember in that JK's Happy Hour was the name of that podcast we couldn't remember before, which you did link to, so that's great. I think you linked to it on your show notes of the previous podcast.
Yes, for the audio version.
There they said they do a lot of other work together that's more like design work or other behind the scenes kind of stuff that comic fans wouldn't see, like maybe for film or toy companies or something. I can't remember what.
Yeah, I think Jones is doing stuff like that. Walker, yeah, you're right. Both of them were. I don't know that they were working together, but they were definitely doing some stuff, some conceptual stuff for toys or games or something like that. But yeah.
So I really want some editors out there to say, these are the guys we've got to get. Let's see what we can do to get them and let them do their thing.
But yes, my main vote, however, would be, let's come back to Danger Club's world and do something. Whether it's the Micro Tokyo focused story or more Silver Agey type stuff, or even like they were joking about doing a funny animal version of these characters. I don't care. Bring it on. I will buy it.
Now that we've gone through the whole thing and gotten to the end, I have mixed feelings on that. It's a little bit like doing Before Watchmen or whatever.
Maybe.
They kind of wrapped things up so much.
Yeah, but see,
there are so many pockets you would like to explore.
Yes. I don't know. While Watchmen, I think works as a novel, in the sense that it has a definite beginning, middle, and end. And Before Watchmen was kind of playing around with that, pushing that concept a little bit, and not so successfully for the most part. But I don't know. I feel like this world, there's so much to this world that could be explored, even though we have we had a resolution to that particular story, but there's so many other stories and characters that they could focus on and do comics about.
I guess. Would those ones not have the metafictional context as this does? I mean, I don't know.
It's a mixed bag, right? You want that because you like it, at least in my case, but at the same time, you're just retreading what we already had, right? So they have to do something different. Maybe I'm going to talk myself out of it now.
I mean, it depends what ideas they have. It just seems a dangerous thing.
No pun intended,
Micro
right?
Tokyo especially appeals to me at this point, and they did mention that as a possibility.
Yeah.
So
All righty.
They may be the only ones who listen to this to the end anyway. So I hope they're taking our advice, whatever our confused advice is.
Yes. That'd be awesome, wouldn't
it? They retweeted you and stuff, right?
Yeah. But if they've actually absorbed the content is another matter. Speaking of such, we have been talking for quite a while, as I mentioned before. Damian, I think it's time that we got out of here. Are there any other parting thoughts you would like to impart to our audience about Danger Club?
I guess just as you've said, go out and get those trades or something. You're in for a treat. And find the alternate ending if you can.
Yep, well said.
I feel like we've covered everything.
Yep, I think we have in great detail. But it was vastly enjoyable.
But let me end with that as my
yes. I was just going to say the same thing. It's been wonderful talking with you, Damon. Thank you so much for agreeing to doing this. Thank you so much for taking the hours out of your days to do this with me. I very much appreciate it, and extend my thank you and appreciation to your family as well.
Okay.
Damian, why don't you remind the fine folks out there where they can find your content that you create out on the interwebs?
You go to YouTube and look up the channel SleepyReader666, and there's new little vloggy kinds of things every few days, depending on how busy I am, and a huge backlog you can watch if you want.
Very good. And if you would like to, if you're listening to this in the future, as you will be, you can leave comments by going to the website, longboxreview.com, where this video and audio will be posted shortly. Other than that, you can email me at longboxreview@gmail.com. You can also contact me on Twitter at longboxreview. And Damian, you're on Twitter as well at SleepyReader666.
66, yeah.
So you can get a hold of him as well. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. I certainly did. Such a great comic. Do what Damian said. Go buy it. Go read it. Go enjoy it. Bye-bye, folks.